June 2015 was a warm month in the Swedish town of Skövde. Provincial life went on as usual, locals knew each other, children walked safely in the streets, and the biggest event was the opening of a new cafe in neighboring Blomberg. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in Sweden. Growing up in a close-knit family, she developed into a determined young woman with clear goals for her future. At 17, Lisa had already mapped out her path. She planned to study social sciences and had dreams of traveling to Australia. Her independence showed early, as she took various part-time jobs to earn her own money. In the spring of 2015, Lisa secured a position at a cafe in Blomberg, approximately 40 minutes from her home. The job represented a significant step toward independence for the teenager. Recognizing this milestone, her father purchased a moped to help her commute to work. However, being protective and aware of her limited experience on the roads, he accompanied her for the first few weeks, following behind in his car as she learned the route. By early June, Lisa had grown confident in her ability to handle the commute independently. Her father agreed it was time for her to make the journey alone. On Sunday, June 7, 2015, Lisa prepared for her first solo trip to work. It was a routine closing shift at the cafe, nothing extraordinary about the day itself. The cafe was busy that afternoon, with Lisa attending to customers throughout her shift. Around lunchtime, her parents visited, sharing a quick meal with their daughter during her break before heading home. The day proceeded normally until closing time approached at 6 p.m. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father, informing him that she was leaving work and would be home soon. 3 minutes later, her father received a call from her phone. When he answered, he heard background voices and what sounded like a car door closing. Assuming Lisa had accidentally dialed his number while talking with colleagues, he called out her name several times but received no response. The call ended, and her father waited for her return. The journey from Blomberg to their home typically took 40 to 45 minutes by moped. When Lisa hadn't arrived by 7:30 p.m., her parents grew increasingly concerned. Multiple calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Her father, fearing she might have had an accident, decided to drive the route himself, carefully scanning the roadsides for any sign of his daughter. When he arrived at the cafe, he spotted Lisa's moped in the parking lot. For a brief moment, relief washed over him, until he noticed the keys were still in the ignition, with her helmet hanging from the handlebar. Lisa would never have left her moped unsecured this way. The cafe was closed and dark. Her father's relief transformed into deep concern. Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, who immediately drove to the location. The owner called 4 friends who lived nearby to assist with the search. Together with Lisa's father, they thoroughly checked the cafe and its immediate surroundings. The last possibility, that Lisa might have decided to take a bus instead, was quickly eliminated when her mother and sister checked the local bus stop. By 10 p.m., with darkness settling in and no sign of Lisa, her family contacted the police. The response was immediate. Given the circumstances, the abandoned moped with keys in the ignition, Lisa's reliable nature, and her complete disappearance, investigators immediately suspected foul play. Search dogs were deployed, and officers began conducting door-to-door inquiries in the vicinity of the cafe. Lisa's friends and classmates, upon learning of her disappearance, began spreading information through social media, hoping to generate leads and possibly locate witnesses. The search continued through the night, but as dawn approached on Monday, June 8, there was still no trace of the missing teenager. The morning after Lisa's disappearance brought the first significant development. A worker entering the barn directly across from the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor. This was particularly noteworthy as police had searched this same barn the previous evening without finding anything. The glove was turned over to authorities by the Blomberg estate's landlord, who reported that farm workers had found it during their morning routine. While Lisa's parents confirmed it belongs to their daughter, the chain of evidence was already compromised, limiting its forensic value. On Monday morning, police made their first public announcement about the disappearance, strategically withholding Lisa's name while requesting information about a missing teenage girl. The investigation intensified as more evidence emerged. A few hundred meters south of the cafe, officers discovered what appeared to be the contents of Lisa's pockets scattered along a small gravel road: a mobile phone case, old receipts, a metro ticket, and pieces of a smashed phone screen. The location was significant. This particular path would have been familiar mainly to locals. The discovery of the broken phone provided crucial insight into the perpetrator's methods. Lisa's last known location, based on phone records, was at the cafe. The lack of subsequent activity suggested either she had been forced to turn off her phone, or more likely, it had been taken and destroyed to prevent tracking. By Tuesday, June 9th, investigators found more of Lisa's belongings, her driver's license and house keys. The search operation was now expanding rapidly. Police established a command center at Kelby Sports Ground near the cafe, coordinating an increasingly complex investigation. The systematic search included emptying mineral wells, examining buildings, and methodically covering farmlands. On Wednesday, June 10th, authorities made the decision to release Lisa's name to the public. The response was unprecedented in Swedish history. Nearly 1,000 volunteers joined the search efforts, making it the largest such operation the country had ever seen. This massive mobilization of civilians worked alongside law enforcement, creating a comprehensive search grid. The investigation took another turn when searchers decided to re-examine the barn. During this subsequent search, one of Lisa's earrings was found near the entrance. This discovery prompted forensics teams to conduct a more thorough examination of the building. They found biological evidence, human feces, which investigators theorized might belong to the perpetrator, noting that extreme stress and adrenaline during violent crimes can trigger such physiological responses. The barn's layout became increasingly significant to the investigation. It wasn't simply an open storage space but contained several rooms, including an office and a milking room. The office provided a clear view of the cafe, allowing anyone inside to observe the young waitresses coming and going. Forensic examination would later reveal evidence of sexual activity on the wall near the window, with DNA matching one of the suspects. As the search radius expanded to 5 kilometers around the cafe, volunteers reached Martork Farm. Here, the investigation encountered its first interaction with the eventual suspects. 2 men approached the search party, speaking English rather than Swedish, claiming the area had already been examined. Despite their assertions, the volunteers' suspicions were aroused, and they contacted police. This decision proved crucial. Near the farm, searchers discovered Lisa's helmet, jacket, and earphones hidden under twigs and foliage. More telling was the discovery of an old wooden trailer that appeared to have been recently accessed, evidenced by flattened grass leading to its entrance. Inside, the space was arranged like an old changing room, with benches and lockers. Most lockers were closed, but one contained old clothes, and hidden behind them, investigators would make their most tragic discovery. Upon entering the trailer, investigators were immediately struck by the unmistakable odor of death. Among the rows of lockers, they found Lisa's body concealed behind old clothing in one of the compartments. She was partially undressed, with a rope around her neck and duct tape covering her mouth and nose. The discovery transformed the missing person case into a murder investigation, focusing attention on Martorp Farm and its connections to the cafe. The investigation quickly centered on 3 individuals, 2 Lithuanian brothers and the wife of one of them. The timing was significant. These were the same men who had attempted to deter volunteers from searching the farm. The brothers, Nerijus Bilavicius and his younger sibling, worked as laborers both at the barn near the cafe and at Martorp Farm. Their residence was strategically located along the gravel road where Lisa's belongings had been found. Forensic examination of the crime scenes yielded crucial evidence. In the barn's office overlooking the cafe, investigators discovered multiple DNA traces from Nerijus Bilavicius on the walls and window area. Cafe employees later recalled seeing both brothers watching them from this vantage point on numerous occasions. In the milking room, a rope attached to a pipe tested positive for Lisa's DNA, establishing it as the likely location of her death. The police reconstruction of events suggested a calculated attack. Evidence indicated that Nerijus had confronted Lisa as she prepared to leave work, likely using his car to transport her to the barn. The medical examination revealed that Lisa died from strangulation, with the perpetrator subsequently moving her body to the trailer at Martorp Farm while discarding her belongings along the way. During this period, a disturbing element emerged online. A YouTube video titled 13 appeared on a channel named Lisa Home, featuring a countdown timer. The video, posted 13 days before Lisa's disappearance, initially caused speculation about premeditation. However, investigation revealed it to be a cruel hoax. The channel name and video title had been changed after Lisa's disappearance became public. Initially, all 3 suspects denied involvement, providing alibis for each other. According to their story, Nerijus had been sleeping at home while his wife prepared dinner and his brother used the computer. They claimed Nerijus later went to a gas station for pizza and cigarettes. However, this carefully constructed narrative began to unravel when confronted with mounting forensic evidence. The breakthrough came when Nerijus's brother broke his silence. He revealed that on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, Nerijus had returned home around 7:30 p.m., covered in dirt, and immediately washed his clothes. More significantly, Nerijus had instructed his brother to provide a false alibi, suggesting that as immigrants, they would be primary suspects regardless of guilt. Further investigation of Nerijus's background revealed disturbing elements. His computer contained extensive collections of dark and violent adult content. Prosecutors later argued that Lisa's suspension from the pipe in the milking room might have been an attempt to recreate scenes from this material. This evidence, combined with the DNA findings in his brother's testimony, built a compelling case against Nerijus Bilavicius. The trial began in November 2015, with prosecutors presenting overwhelming forensic evidence. Despite attempts by Nerijus's defense to shift blame to his brother and explain away the DNA evidence through his work at the barn, the case against him was insurmountable. The presence of his DNA on Lisa's clothing, particularly her underwear, could only be explained by direct contact during the crime. The trial lasted 1 month, drawing intense national attention. On November 17, 2015, the court reached its verdict. Nerijus Bilavicius was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security Swedish facility. His legal team attempted to appeal the verdict, but this effort was rejected, seemingly closing this chapter of the case. The Swedish prison system, known for its humanitarian approach, provided Bilavicius with conditions more akin to a modest hotel than a traditional prison. However, in early 2017, he made an unexpected request for transfer to his native Lithuania. The Swedish courts approved this transfer, despite Lithuanian prisons being notably harsher than their Swedish counterparts. His motivations became clear when, shortly after the transfer, Bilavicius appealed to the Lithuanian courts and successfully had his sentence reduced from life to 15 years. This victory proved short-lived. Within weeks, the court overturned its decision, reinstating his life sentence. Now Bilavicius found himself facing the same sentence but in significantly worse conditions, with no possibility of returning to the Swedish system. The case's final chapter came on August 3, 2022, when Bilavicius was attacked by another inmate during a prison transfer. The assailant stabbed him in the neck with a makeshift weapon, and despite efforts to save him, Bilavicius died en route to the hospital. Reports suggested he had faced constant harassment from other inmates, both in Sweden and Lithuania, with one incident involving inmates pouring nearly boiling water on him. Questions lingered about the potential involvement of Bilavicius's wife and brother. While investigators found no physical evidence linking them to Lisa's murder, their DNA was absent from both her belongings and the crime scenes. Their role in providing false alibis raised concerns. Cafe employees' accounts of seeing two men watching from the barn suggested the younger brother's awareness of his siblings' behavior, even if he hadn't participated in the murder itself. The case profoundly impacted Swedish society. Lisa's funeral drew mourners beyond the church's 130-person capacity, requiring outdoor screens to accommodate the overflow crowd. The investigation set records for public participation in Swedish history, with over 1,000 volunteers joining the search efforts. This unprecedented civilian mobilization demonstrated both the community's solidarity and the deep shock such a crime caused in a country known for its safety. The investigation also highlighted both strengths and weaknesses in Swedish law enforcement. While the initial searches of the barn missed crucial evidence, the subsequent forensic work proved meticulous and decisive. The case led to procedural changes in how missing persons cases are handled, particularly regarding the thoroughness of initial searches and the preservation of potential crime scenes. Lisa Holmes' case remains one of Sweden's most notorious crimes, not only for its brutality but for how it challenged the nation's sense of security. The case demonstrated how a community could unite in crisis while exposing vulnerabilities in even the safest societies. The investigation's success in identifying and convicting the perpetrator provided some measure of justice, though the tragic loss of a young life with such promise continues to resonate. The Lisa Holm case fundamentally altered how Sweden views public safety, particularly in rural communities long considered immune to serious crime. The investigation's timeline, from Lisa's disappearance to the conviction of her killer, spanned just over 5 months, but its influence on Swedish society and law enforcement practices continues to resonate. The case highlighted the changing nature of rural Swedish communities. Blomberg, like many small towns, had increasingly relied on international workers for agricultural and industrial labor. While this practice had generally been uncontroversial, Lisa's murder sparked difficult conversations about integration, background checks, and community safety. However, authorities worked to prevent the case from stigmatizing immigrant communities, emphasizing that criminal behavior knows no nationality. The investigation revolutionized Swedish missing persons protocols. The initial search of the barn, which missed crucial evidence later discovered by volunteers, led to comprehensive reforms in evidence collection procedures. New guidelines emphasized thorough initial searches and better coordination between professional law enforcement and civilian volunteers. The case became a teaching tool in Swedish police academies, demonstrating both successful investigative techniques and areas for improvement. The unprecedented scale of civilian participation in the search efforts created a model for community involvement in criminal investigations. The mobilization of over 1,000 volunteers demonstrated the potential of coordinated civilian-police cooperation. This aspect of the case influenced how Swedish authorities now approach large-scale searches, with improved systems for organizing and managing volunteer participants. Lisa's parents, while maintaining their privacy, worked with authorities to establish better protection measures for young workers. Their experience led to enhanced safety protocols in rural businesses, particularly those employing teenage workers. These included improved lighting in parking areas, security cameras, and buddy systems for closing shifts. Many businesses also implemented mandatory safety training for young employees. Digital aspects of the case, particularly the hoax YouTube video, highlighted the emerging challenges of investigating crimes in the social media era. The incident led to increased awareness of how online platforms can both help and hinder investigations. Swedish police developed new protocols for handling social media elements in criminal cases, including faster response times to online leads and better verification procedures. The case also affected Sweden's international criminal justice cooperation, particularly regarding prisoner transfers between EU countries. The complexities of Bilavicius's transfer to Lithuania and the subsequent legal battles over his sentence led to closer scrutiny of international prisoner transfer agreements. Swedish authorities now more carefully consider the implications of such transfers, particularly in high-profile cases. In Blomberg and surrounding communities, the case left an indelible mark. The barn where Lisa was killed was eventually demolished, though the site remains a somber reminder of the tragedy. Local residents established a memorial scholarship in Lisa's name, supporting young people pursuing careers in social services, reflecting her own intended career path. The case continues to influence Swedish crime literature and media, serving as a sobering reminder that even the safest societies must remain vigilant. However, coverage increasingly focuses on the investigative successes and community response rather than the tragic details, honoring Lisa's memory by emphasizing positive changes her case inspired. Through all these changes and developments, Lisa Holm is remembered not for the circumstances of her death, but for how her case united a nation and inspired meaningful reforms. Her legacy lives on in improved safety measures, better investigative procedures, and stronger community bonds, ensuring that future generations benefit from the harsh lessons learned from her tragic loss. On April 22, 2024, at 9:30 in the morning, the quiet street of Check Hall Road in Yukon, Oklahoma trembled from the sound of police sirens. A few minutes earlier, the 911 dispatcher received a call from a 10-year-old boy who reported finding his entire family dead. The police officers who arrived at the scene discovered a true massacre. In the Candy family home lay the bodies of 5 people: 39-year-old Lindsay Candy, her sons, 18-year-old Dylan, 14-year-old Ethan, 12-year-old Lucas, and their 42-year-old father Jonathan Candy. Everyone except Jonathan died from gunshot wounds. Jonathan himself died by suicide, shooting himself in the head. For the neighbors and acquaintances, the Candy family was the embodiment of the American dream. Jonathan met Lindsay Terry when she was a young chorister in the church choir. He graduated from Bishop McGinnis Catholic School. She grew up in Prague, Oklahoma. Their marriage seemed like the perfect match. The jovial, witty Jonathan and the cheerful Lindsay created the family many dream of. Their Facebook page was filled with ordinary family photos: kids with ice cream-smeared faces, family picnics, sports competitions, home construction projects. Jonathan worked part-time at the Paycom Center, a large arena where concerts and sporting events were held. He often worked at the home games of the Oklahoma City Thunder team. Lindsay was actively involved in the kids' school life, organizing events and assisting teachers. Neighbors described them as a friendly family, always ready to help. According to one of the neighbors, 68-year-old Michael Burcham, Jonathan loved to socialize and help with various tasks around the neighborhood. In 2022, the couple even appeared in an episode of the program Discovering Oklahoma, talking about their favorite bakery in Yukon. In the video, they looked happy and carefree. Jonathan joked about breakfasts, and Lindsay shared her love for carrot cake. In all the years of living together, the police never once went to their address, neither because of family conflicts nor because of neighborly disputes. Nothing foreshadowed the looming tragedy. The Candy kids were a particular source of pride for their parents. The eldest son, Dylan, had just graduated from Mustang High School in May 2023. He had a special talent for music and played drums in the university orchestra at Oklahoma Baptist University, where he was a freshman. The university orchestra director, Brian Stackhouse, recalled how Dylan couldn't sit still with joy when he found out about his first orchestra solo. 14-year-old Ethan was in 9th grade at Mustang North Middle School and was a promising baseball player. His coach, T.J. Armstrong, called the boy "Sweet Candy" and noted his natural talent and extraordinary energy on the field. Ethan was the best friend of the coach's son, and they often spent time together after practice. 12-year-old Lucas, a student at Meadowbrook Intermediate, was an active child who loved sports and outdoor games. He was often seen at his older brother's practices, where he played with other children. The youngest, 10-year-old son, whose name is not disclosed for ethical reasons, was an ordinary cheerful boy. The family lived in a cozy house on a quiet street where everyone knew each other. Neighbors recall how the children often played in the yard, and Jonathan always found time to help with any household chores. He could mow the neighbor's lawn or help with repairs, never refusing to help. However, behind this perfect facade hid problems that later led to the tragedy. Financial documents found later by investigators indicated significant family debts. Unpaid medical bills, bank loans, and overdue credit cards created constant pressure. Working only part-time, Jonathan could hardly provide an adequate standard of living for a large family. However, none of those around noticed signs of serious problems. Jonathan continued to joke and create a cheerful atmosphere at work at the Paycom Center. Lindsay remained active in the kids' school life. The boys were doing well in school and engaged in their favorite activities. From the outside, everything looked quite normal. According to relatives, disagreements between Jonathan and Lindsay about finances became more frequent. Lindsay expressed concern about the family's future due to growing debts, while Jonathan felt he was losing control of the situation. In his diary, found later by investigators, he wrote about feelings of his own inadequacy to be the person his family needed. On the evening of April 21st, a few hours before the tragedy, Jonathan was working at the playoff game between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the New Orleans Pelicans. Colleagues recalled that he was in his usual mood, joking and talking to everyone. Nothing indicated that this would be his last working day. After returning home, according to investigators, a serious argument occurred between the couple. The details of this conversation will remain forever unknown, but it could have been the last straw. Forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, who analyzed the case, suggests that Jonathan may have been in a state of acute psychological crisis when a person loses the ability to think rationally. The exact timeline of events that night is difficult to establish. The only witness, the 10-year-old boy, was sleeping in his room with a fan turned on. He only remembers a short sound of the fire alarm at night, after which he fell asleep again. The noise of the fan drowned out all other sounds. Investigators found that 2 bodies were on the upper floor of the house, 2 on the lower floor. No signs of a struggle were found at the crime scene, which may indicate the suddenness of the attack or that the victims were taken by surprise. The weapon was found next to Jonathan's body. The decision of Jonathan to spare the youngest son remains particularly puzzling. Dr. Johnston notes that such cases are extremely rare. Usually in family murders, the perpetrator either kills all family members or touches no one. Perhaps at the last moment, parental feelings prevailed, or there was another unknown reason. According to investigators who arrived at the crime scene, The bodies were found in different parts of the house, which may indicate that Jonathan methodically moved from one victim to another. This is confirmed by the absence of signs of struggle. Probably, family members were caught by surprise during sleep. The investigation also revealed other alarming details. In Jonathan's personal diary, found in his desk at work, progressive depression could be traced. The entries of recent months were becoming increasingly gloomy. He wrote about feelings of his own inadequacy, about not meeting expectations as a father and husband. Financial problems and fear of the future were mentioned especially often. Forensic psychologist Dr. Joni Johnston, analyzing the diary, noted classic signs of hidden depression in men. Men often mask their emotional problems behind jokes and showy cheerfulness, she explains. In Jonathan's case, his reputation as the life of the party could have been a way to hide deep inner experiences. Jonathan's colleagues from the Paycom Center recalled that he always created a cheerful atmosphere at work. He constantly joked, tried to lift the mood of others, one of the employees said. I never saw him angry or irritated. Nothing indicated that he was capable of such a terrible act. However, the family's financial documents told a different story. Numerous unpaid bills, overdue credit card payments, and medical debts were found. Working only part-time at the arena, Jonathan could hardly provide sufficient income for a family of 6. Lindsay, who was engaged in housekeeping and childcare, did not have a regular job. Neighbors recalled that they had recently noticed certain changes in the behavior of the couple. They still seemed like a friendly couple, but something was off, neighbor Rhonda Armstrong said. Lindsay started smiling less, and Jonathan, although he continued to joke, looked somehow tense. The evening of April 21st was particularly important for the investigation. After working at the basketball game, Jonathan returned home and, according to relatives, a serious argument occurred between him and Lindsay. The details of this conversation are unknown, but it could have been the catalyst for the subsequent events. The tragedy unfolded in the quiet of the night. According to the investigation, the first shots rang out after midnight. The location of the bodies and ballistic examination allowed partial reconstruction of the sequence of events. Lindsay became the first victim. Her body was found in the bedroom on the first floor. Then Jonathan went upstairs, where he shot the older sons, Dylan and Ethan. Lucas probably woke up from the sounds of gunshots and tried to hide, but his father found him on the first floor. The youngest son was sleeping in his room with a fan turned on. This simple household appliance, creating white noise, possibly saved his life by drowning out the sounds of the tragedy. The only sound the boy remembered from that night was a short fire alarm signal, possibly triggered by gunpowder smoke. After killing the family members, Jonathan Candy wrote a short note, found later by investigators, next to his body. The contents of the note are not disclosed for ethical reasons, but, according to detectives, it contained an apology and an explanation of his actions related to feelings of hopelessness and inability to provide for the family. At 9:30 a.m., the 10-year-old boy woke up and, leaving his room, discovered a terrible scene. Showing composure unusual for his age, he called 911. The dispatcher later noted the child's extraordinary collectedness during the conversation, despite the shocking circumstances. The first police officers who arrived at the scene found the boy on the porch of the house. He was in a state of shock but was able to clearly answer questions. The officers immediately called for backup and medics, although it was obvious that no one would need help anymore, except for the child. Detectives, examining the crime scene, noted the neatness of the house. There were no signs of disorder or struggle anywhere, which is characteristic of sudden outbursts of violence. This led investigators to believe that the actions were premeditated. However, further investigation did not reveal evidence of long-term planning. Jonathan did not buy the weapon specifically for this, did not make detailed plans, did not leave extensive explanations of his intentions. Neighbors began to gather near the house, hearing the sirens of police cars. News of the tragedy quickly spread through the quiet street. Michael Burcham, a 68-year-old neighbor, could not believe what had happened. "I saw Jonathan literally yesterday. He was helping me with the lawnmower," he told the police. "He was his usual self, joking, smiling. How could this happen?" Brian Graham, another neighbor, recalled Jonathan as a reliable person, always ready to help. "He could fix anything, always responded to requests for help. It's just impossible to believe that such a person is capable of something like this," he shared with reporters who began to arrive at the scene. By noon, the area was filled with police cars, ambulances, and news service vans. The boy was taken by relatives who arrived immediately after learning about the tragedy. The police organized a press conference where they announced the first official details of the event. The community's reaction to the tragedy was immediate. Dylan's friends from the Oklahoma Baptist University Orchestra organized a memorial service where they displayed his dress uniform and favorite drum. Orchestra director Brian Stackhouse recalled how the young man could not contain his joy when he received his first solo. He just glowed with happiness. Dylan was a talented musician and a wonderful person. At Mustang North Middle School, where Ethan studied, Coach T.J. Armstrong gathered the team to report the death of their teammate. "Ethan was the heart of our team," the coach said, barely holding back tears. His energy and optimism inspired everyone around him. Ethan's friends, including the coach's son, decided to install a memorial bench on the baseball field in honor of their friend. Students at Meadowbrook Intermediate, where Lucas studied, created a wall of memory filled with photographs, drawings, and memories of the 12-year-old boy. His teachers remembered him as an active, cheerful student who was always ready to help others. Meanwhile, investigators continued to gather information about the family's last days. It turned out that Jonathan had recently tried to find an additional job, but without success. Financial documents showed growing debts for utilities and credit cards. His phone contained search queries about bankruptcy and debts. Friends of the family created a GoFundMe page to support the surviving boy. The fundraising goal was set at $100,000, and in the first days, more than $61,000 was raised. The boy's uncle, Brett Remorowski, expressed gratitude for the support, but noted, "All these expressions of attention make me wonder what will happen when the attention fades and only reality remains." Psychologists involved in working with the boy emphasized the importance of long-term support. "Trauma of this magnitude requires years of therapy and constant support," explained Dr. Joni Johnston. "It is important not only to help cope with the loss but also to understand what happened as he grows up." The investigation revealed that Jonathan suffered from a hidden form of depression, which is especially common among men. Instead of directly expressing sadness, they often masked their condition with showy cheerfulness and jokes. His constant jokes and desire to cheer others up could have been a way to hide his own problems. Cammie Cruz, Lindsay's childhood friend, shared memories of their school years. She told a story about how she and Lindsay once fell asleep in a treehouse, causing panic among parents, who even called the police. "Lindsay always brought joy to any conversation," Cruz recalled. "She was an extremely loving mother and wife." Jonathan's colleagues from the Paycom Center were shocked by the events. They described him as a reliable employee who created a positive atmosphere during Oklahoma City Thunder home games. No one noticed signs of stress or unusual behavior, even during his last shift at the playoff game. Jonathan's family released an official statement after the tragedy. "Our entire family has been left shattered and bewildered, with countless questions that we will never get answers to." Jonathan was the one whose jokes and cheerful character made everyone smile. Aside from these events, his children and wife were his entire life. Investigators, analyzing Jonathan's psychological state, noted typical signs characteristic of family killers. Dr. Joni Johnston noted that such crimes are often associated with a loss of control over the life situation. These men often see their families as an extension of themselves, as their property. When they feel they are losing control of the situation, it can lead to catastrophic consequences. The family's financial situation turned out to be more complicated than it initially seemed. In addition to consumer debts, unpaid medical bills and overdue mortgage payments were found. Working only part-time at the arena, Jonathan could hardly provide sufficient income for a family of 6. The Yukon community organized several memorial services to honor the memory of the deceased. In the schools where the boys studied, special places of remembrance were created. Ethan's sports team decided to dedicate the season to him, and Dylan's music group performed a special concert in his honor. The city's psychological service organized support groups for friends of the family and classmates of the deceased children. Such tragedies affect the entire community, psychologist Joanna Smith explained. It is especially difficult for children who have lost friends and are trying to understand how this could happen. Investigators continue to work on understanding the motives of the tragedy. Analysis of Jonathan's phone revealed numerous search queries about depression and financial problems, but no signs of planning the crime. This confirmed the theory about the impulsive nature of his actions. Particular attention was drawn to the fact that the life of the youngest son was preserved. Forensic psychologists suggest several possible explanations, from a sudden manifestation of parental feelings to an inability to harm the youngest child. This is a rare case in the practice of family murders, noted Dr. Johnston. Usually such criminals either kill the entire family or touch no one. The investigation also revealed that Jonathan had recently tried to find additional work. Numerous submitted resumes and correspondence regarding possible employment were found on his computer. This indicated his attempts to improve the financial situation, but obviously unsuccessful. The police found that the weapon used in the murders legally belonged to Jonathan. He purchased it several years ago for self-defense, and none of the family or friends expressed concern about its presence in the house. The tragedy of the Candy family forced the Yukon community to reconsider its attitude towards mental health, especially among men. Local health organizations launched a campaign to raise awareness about hidden depression and the importance of seeking help in a timely manner. Men are often ashamed to talk about their emotional problems, explained Dr. Joanna Smith. They can wear a mask of cheerfulness for years, hiding serious psychological problems. The case of Jonathan Candy shows how dangerous such hiding can be. School psychologists conducted a series of meetings with students and parents, discussing the importance of open dialogue about emotional problems. We must learn to recognize the warning signs, school counselor Mark Thompson emphasized. Often the people who are suffering the most are the ones who hide it best. The Yukon Police Department made changes to the protocols for responding to family conflicts. Even if there are no obvious signs of violence, we need to be more attentive to hidden problems, noted Police Captain Robert Hayes. The story of the Candy family shows that the absence of previous calls does not mean the absence of problems. The local church community organized weekly support meetings for men where they could openly talk about their problems and fears. We must break the stereotype that seeking help is a sign of weakness, emphasized Pastor Michael Green. In fact, it is a manifestation of wisdom and responsibility. Special attention was paid to supporting the 10-year-old boy who remained the only surviving member of the family. His uncle, Brett Remarowski, became the official guardian. Our main task is to ensure that he has the most normal childhood possible, despite the tragic circumstances, he shared with the press. The community continued to raise funds to support the boy. In addition to GoFundMe, local entrepreneurs organized a charity golf tournament, and schools held several charity fairs. This money will ensure his future education and long-term psychological support, explained the fundraiser organizer. School friends of the deceased brothers created an online memorial where they shared memories and photographs. "We want the memory of Dylan, Ethan, and Lucas to live on," wrote Ethan's classmate, Cooper Armstrong. "They were wonderful friends and will forever remain in our hearts." The Candy family case became an important lesson for the entire community. It showed how serious problems can hide behind the facade of a perfect family, and how important it is to notice warning signs in a timely manner and not be ashamed to seek help. The tragedy highlighted the issue of hidden depression, particularly among men. Local mental health organizations began offering more resources and support for those struggling with emotional problems. They emphasized the importance of breaking the stigma around seeking help and encouraged open conversations about mental health. Schools implemented new programs to educate students about emotional well-being and to provide a safe space for them to discuss their concerns. Teachers and staff received additional training on recognizing signs of distress and intervening when necessary. The Yukon Police Department also re-evaluated their approach to domestic situations. They implemented new protocols for assessing the risk of violence, even in the absence of prior incidents. Officers received training on identifying subtle signs of abuse and providing resources to families in need. The community rallied around the surviving boy, ensuring that he had a strong support system. His school provided counseling services and worked closely with his guardian to monitor his emotional well-being. Local organizations set up a trust fund to cover his future educational and medical expenses. As time passed, the makeshift memorials for the Candy family were replaced with permanent ones. A bench in Dylan's name was placed outside the music room at Oklahoma Baptist University. Ethan's baseball team retired his jersey number and hung it in the dugout. Lucas's classmates planted a tree in his memory on the school grounds. The house on Check Hall Road stood empty for months, a somber reminder of the tragedy that had occurred within its walls. Eventually, it was purchased by a young family who hoped to fill it with new memories and love. 1 year after the tragedy, the community gathered for a memorial service. They shared stories of the Candy family and reflected on the lessons learned. The surviving boy, now 11, spoke briefly, thanking everyone for their support and expressing his determination to honor his family's memory. In the years that followed, the boy grew into a resilient young man. He excelled in school and became an advocate for mental health awareness. He shared his story with others, hoping to inspire them to seek help and to break the cycle of silence. The Candy family tragedy served as a wake-up call for the entire community. It highlighted the importance of looking beyond the surface and offering support to those in need. It showed that even the most seemingly perfect families can struggle with hidden problems and that it is crucial to create a culture of openness and compassion. Though the pain of the loss would never fully heal, the community found strength in each other. They honored the memory of the Candy family by working to create a safer, more supportive environment for all. They hoped that by learning from this tragedy, they could prevent others from suffering the same fate. Years later, as the surviving boy graduated from college, he took a moment to reflect on his journey. He thought of his parents and siblings, and the love they had shared. He thought of the community that had rallied around him, providing strength when he needed it most. And he thought of the future, and the hope that he carried with him. As he stepped off the stage, diploma in hand, he knew that his family's legacy would live on through him. He was determined to make a difference in the world, to help others who were struggling, and to spread a message of hope and resilience. He knew that even in the darkest of times, there was always a reason to keep going, to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. The Candy family tragedy had left an indelible mark on the community of Yukon, Oklahoma. But it had also shown the incredible strength and compassion that could be found in the human spirit. It had shown that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there was always the potential for healing, for growth, and for hope. As the years passed, the story of the Candy family continued to be told, serving as a reminder of the importance of kindness, understanding, and support. It was a story of loss, but also one of resilience. It was a story that would never be forgotten, a story that would continue to inspire and to heal, long after the last page had been turned.
Bogotá, the capital of Colombia, pulsates with the energy of nightlife. The bright lights of clubs illuminate the streets, and the rhythmic sounds of Latin American music emanate from every corner. Amidst this vibrant world, a young star emerges: Valentina Tres Palacios. At 23 years old, Valentina had already become a well-known figure on Colombia's club scene. Her talent as a DJ, charisma, and beauty quickly made her a crowd favorite. The clubs where she performed were always packed, and her name on a poster guaranteed a successful evening. However, behind the glare of spotlights and loud music lay a story that would soon shake not only Bogotá, but the entire world. Valentina Tres Palacios was born on December 16, 2001, to Giovanni Tres Palacios and Laura Hidalgo. Along with her older brother Daniel, she grew up in Bogotá, the capital of Colombia. Valentina's childhood was marked by changes. Her parents divorced, and the girl remained with her mother and brother. Laura Hidalgo, Valentina's mother, became the backbone for her children. She worked tirelessly, often at several jobs simultaneously, to provide for the family. This mother's dedication deeply influenced Valentina and Daniel, instilling in them a strong sense of responsibility and ambition. Over time, Valentina's family expanded. Her mother entered into a new relationship, which led to the birth of two more younger children, a brother and a sister. Valentina and Daniel lovingly accepted the new family members, further strengthening their family bonds. Already in her teenage years, Valentina began to show an interest in music and nightlife. At 15, she first entered a nightclub, discovering a world that would later become her profession and passion. At the age of 17, fate brought Valentina together with someone who significantly influenced her professional path. During one of the parties, she met Pablo Silva, a local entrepreneur who saw potential in the young girl. After several casual conversations, Pablo offered Valentina a chance to try her hand as a DJ. This offer became a turning point in Valentina's life. She enthusiastically took up learning, dedicating her free time to mastering the art of DJing. Over the next few months, Valentina and Pablo maintained regular contact, allowing the girl to quickly progress in her skills. In 2019, after 2 years of hard work, Valentina successfully completed the course and received a professional DJ certificate. Pablo, impressed by her talent and dedication to the craft, took on the role of her manager. Thanks to his connections in the entertainment industry, Valentina began to receive her first professional bookings to perform in Bogotá clubs. The relationship between Valentina and Pablo was not limited to the professional sphere. Over time, a romantic attachment developed between them, which lasted for 3 years. Despite their eventual breakup, they maintained a warm relationship, and Pablo continued to manage her career, sincerely wishing her success. Over the next few years, Valentina's career skyrocketed. Her natural charisma, musical talent, and ability to sense the mood of the audience quickly made her one of the most sought-after DJs in Colombia. Valentina regularly performed at the most popular clubs in Bogotá and Medellin, drawing full houses of fans. Valentina's success was not limited to the borders of Colombia. Her talent caught the attention of organizers of international festivals and clubs in neighboring countries. She received invitations to perform in Chile, Mexico, and Brazil, which significantly expanded her professional horizons and increased her fan base. Parallel to her music career, Valentina began working as a model. Her natural beauty and style attracted the attention of the fashion industry, opening up new opportunities for her. This additional activity not only increased her popularity, but also became an additional source of income. Despite the rapid rise in her career, Valentina did not forget about her family. She used the money she earned to support her mother and younger siblings, often treating them to gifts, movie outings, and restaurant visits. This generosity and dedication to family only added to her appeal in the eyes of fans. In early 2022, when Valentina's career was on the rise, fate brought her together with a man who would radically change her life. Through the dating app Tinder, she met 34-year-old American John Poulos. Despite the significant age difference and language barrier, they struck up a conversation. John, who had a poor command of Spanish, used an online translator to communicate with Valentina. This obstacle, however, did not prevent them from developing a virtual relationship. John, enchanted by Valentina's beauty and charisma, showed remarkable persistence in communication. He talked about his life in Texas, his work, and interests. Valentina, for her part, shared stories about her DJ career and life in Bogotá. Over several weeks, their communication became increasingly intense. They exchanged messages daily, gradually learning more about each other. John showed particular interest in Valentina's career, often asking about her performances and plans for the future. After several weeks of virtual communication, John proposed a personal meeting. Since Valentina had a scheduled performance at a festival in Mexico, they decided it was the perfect opportunity for a first date. Mexico was a convenient meeting place, located between Colombia and Texas. Valentina, who was used to male attention, was intrigued by the prospect of meeting an American. John, for his part, spared no expense in organizing this meeting, covering all travel expenses. When they finally met, the first impression was positive for both. Despite the language barrier, they managed to find common ground. John was enchanted by Valentina's beauty and energy in person, while she appreciated his gallantry and generosity. During the few days in Mexico, they spent a lot of time together. John accompanied Valentina to her performance, impressed by her professionalism and popularity among the audience. They also explored the city, enjoying local cuisine and landmarks. This first meeting was so enjoyable for both that they decided to extend their stay in Mexico, spending almost 2 weeks together. During this time, they grew closer, and what began as a chance online acquaintance turned into a real romantic relationship. After returning from Mexico, Valentina and John decided to continue their relationship, despite the geographical distance between them. John, who had the financial means to travel frequently, regularly visited Colombia to see Valentina. During his visits, John demonstrated a generosity that impressed not only Valentina but also her family. He gave expensive gifts, paid for luxurious dinners, and organized extravagant entertainment. This financial support extended to Valentina's professional sphere. John sponsored her cosmetic procedures and wardrobe updates, which were important for her career as a model and DJ. When John couldn't be in Colombia, the couple maintained contact through video calls and messages. They discussed their days, shared plans for the future, and dreamed about joint travels. John often expressed his admiration for Valentina's successes, supporting her ambitions in the music industry. However, over time, the first signs of tension began to appear. John increasingly showed concern about Valentina's work in nightclubs and her communication with other men. He insisted on frequent video calls, especially when Valentina was at work, which sometimes caused her discomfort. As the relationship developed, details of John's past, which Valentina initially didn't know about, began to emerge. It turned out that he was a recently divorced father of 3 children. His marriage to Ashley Poulos ended in divorce in January 2022, just a few months before meeting Valentina. The story of John's previous marriage was full of drama. In 2018, one of his sons was diagnosed with cancer, which became a huge trial for the family. The stress associated with the child's illness and caring for 3 children obviously negatively affected John's character. According to his ex-wife, he became aggressive, which eventually led to divorce. The divorce process revealed another unpleasant side of John. He transferred all the couple's joint property to an offshore trust, effectively leaving his former family without means of subsistence. Moreover, he refused to pay child support, demonstrating a complete lack of responsibility for their well-being. These facts from John's past remained unknown to Valentina for a significant period of their relationship. She saw only the side of John that he wanted to show a successful, generous man ready to do anything for her. However, over time, his controlling behavior and jealousy became more obvious, gradually revealing his true nature. As time passed, the relationship between Valentina and John began to take on an increasingly tense character. John, who was initially attracted by Valentina's popularity and success, now became excessively jealous and suspicious. His controlling behavior became more and more obvious. John began to insist that Valentina video call him every time she went to an event or performance. He wanted to know where she was, who she was talking to, and even controlled her clothing. This behavior caused discomfort for Valentina, who valued her independence and professional freedom. The situation reached a critical point when John, not trusting Valentina, hired a private detective to follow her. This fact deeply offended Valentina when she found out about it. She felt that her personal life and trust had been grossly violated. Valentina's family, who initially approved of her relationship with John, now began to express concern. Although they still considered him Valentina's protector, John's obvious obsession and controlling behavior caused them anxiety. In December 2022, the situation reached a critical point. Valentina, tired of John's constant control and suspicions, tried to end the relationship. She felt that his behavior was becoming increasingly intrusive and toxic. John, faced with the prospect of losing Valentina, resorted to desperate measures. He confessed that he had hired a private detective who allegedly confirmed his suspicions about Valentina's infidelity. This statement led to a heated argument, during which Valentina firmly denied all accusations. Realizing that his actions could lead to the end of the relationship, John abruptly changed tactics. He began to beg Valentina for forgiveness, promising to change. Moreover, he announced his decision to move from Texas to Colombia to be closer to her. John argued that constant presence near Valentina would help him overcome his insecurity and jealousy. He also expressed a desire to marry her and start a family. This unexpected proposal and apparent readiness for serious life changes impressed Valentina. After long deliberation and under the influence of emotions, Valentina decided to give their relationship another chance. She agreed to live together, hoping that proximity would help resolve their problems and strengthen their connection. At the beginning of 2023, John implemented his plan to move to Colombia. On January 19th, he arrived in Bogotá, renting an apartment in a prestigious residential complex for 4 days. This short rental period would later raise suspicions among investigators. On January 20th, John rented a gray Volkswagen Voyage car and helped Valentina move her things to the new apartment. Valentina was full of enthusiasm about their life together, as evidenced by a video call to her mother, during which she conducted a virtual tour of the new home. That same evening, the couple visited the Nexus nightclub, where Valentina was to perform as a DJ. Witnesses saw them together. They seemed happy and slightly tipsy, but not drunk. However, some eyewitnesses noticed that John looked jealous due to the attention Valentina was receiving from other club visitors. Valentina's last known public appearance occurred late on January 20th, when she and John were returning to their apartment. Surveillance cameras recorded them entering the building together. The events that took place on the night of January 20th to 21st remain the subject of investigation and trial. However, based on evidence and testimony, it's possible to reconstruct the likely course of events. According to the forensic examination, Valentina's death occurred on Saturday, January 21st. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation and injuries from blunt force trauma. Numerous bruises were found on Valentina's body, particularly on the neck, face, and forearms. Abrasions in the mouth indicated the particular brutality of the attack. The fact that Valentina was found in a nightgown suggests that the attack occurred when she was asleep or preparing for sleep. This may also explain why she was unable to defend herself effectively. The motive for the crime, according to the investigation's version, could have been John's jealousy. He may have learned about Valentina's relationship with another man, Santiago Luna, whom she had been seeing since November 2022. This information likely became the catalyst for John's outburst of anger. It's important to note that these details are based on evidence collected by the investigation, and the final picture of events can only be established during the trial process. On January 22, 2023, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the lives of many people changed forever. A homeless person, searching for something valuable in trash bins near the El Dorado International Airport in Bogotá, made a gruesome discovery. The man came across a large blue suitcase that turned out to be unusually heavy. When he tried to open it, he saw that it was carefully wrapped with duct tape. Cutting through the tape, he found a white garbage bag with bloodstains inside. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the homeless man immediately reported the find to the authorities. The police quickly arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area. Upon detailed inspection, they discovered that inside the suitcase was the body of a young woman. Next to the body in the suitcase, a small black box with personal belongings was found, including a student ID and a paper identification card. These documents helped quickly identify the victim as Valentina Tres Palacios. The discovery of Valentina's body marked the beginning of a large-scale investigation. Bogotá police immediately began collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The first step was to establish a chronology of the last days of Valentina's life. Investigators turned to Valentina's family and friends to obtain information about her last contacts and plans. Particular attention was drawn to the fact that Valentina did not show up for a scheduled performance at the Nexus Club on Saturday, January 21st. An important witness was Valentina's manager, Pablo Silva. He reported that he couldn't contact her for a day, which was extremely uncharacteristic of her. It was Pablo who first called Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, informing her of the tragedy. Investigators also focused on collecting video materials from surveillance cameras in the area where the body was found, as well as from places Valentina had visited in recent days. Special attention was paid to recordings from the residential complex where she lived with John. Analysis of Valentina's mobile phone, found along with her belongings, revealed numerous missed calls from Pablo and other contacts, confirming the unusualness of her disappearance. From the very beginning of the investigation, the main attention of investigators was focused on John Poulos, given his close relationship with Valentina and the fact that he was the last person to see her alive. His sudden departure from Colombia on the day the body was discovered only intensified suspicions. When the police began investigating Valentina's death, John Poulos was already implementing his escape plan. On January 22nd, the same day the body was discovered, John left Colombia, boarding a flight to Panama. His actions indicated careful preparation. John closed all his social media pages and turned off his phone, complicating attempts to contact him. He had $7,000 in cash and several bank cards with him. John's plan was complex and well thought out. From Panama, he planned to fly to Istanbul and from there to Montenegro. The choice of Montenegro was not random. This country does not have an extradition treaty with Colombia, which theoretically could protect him from prosecution. To confuse his trail, John purchased tickets for different flights. He had tickets not only to Istanbul, but also to São Paulo in Brazil. All tickets were purchased with cash, making them difficult to trace. These actions by John immediately drew the attention of investigators and made him the main suspect in the case. Colombian authorities declared him wanted and established a reward of 20 million Colombian pesos, approximately $4,500 for information about his whereabouts. John Poulos' escape turned into an international operation for his detention. Colombian police cooperated with Interpol and law enforcement agencies of other countries to track his movements. Thanks to quick and coordinated actions by the authorities, John was detained at the Panama airport. The dramatic arrest occurred literally minutes before he was to board a flight to Istanbul. During the detention, a significant amount of cash and several credit cards were found on John. Additionally, scratches were noticeable on his face, which, according to investigators' assumptions, could have been traces of a struggle with Valentina. John's attempt to explain his escape proved unconvincing. He claimed he was fleeing from the Medellin cartel, which was allegedly responsible for Valentina's death and was now pursuing him. This version was quickly dismissed by investigators as implausible. John's detention in Panama became a key moment in the investigation. It not only prevented his possible disappearance, but also provided the investigation with important evidence and the opportunity to conduct a detailed interrogation of the suspect. Just a day after his detention, on January 26th, John Poulos was extradited to Colombia. There he appeared before the court, where he was charged with the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios and concealment of evidence. On January 26, 2023, John Poulos was extradited to Colombia. His arrival in Bogotá was accompanied by heightened security measures. Police and journalists waited at the airport for the murder suspect to be led off the plane. The first images of John after extradition showed a man with noticeable scratches on his face, confirming the observations made during his detention in Panama. These scratches became an important element of the evidence base, as they could indicate a struggle with the victim. After arrival, John was immediately taken to a detention center for initial interrogations. During these interrogations, he continued to insist on his innocence. repeating the version about being pursued by a cartel. However, investigators quickly found inconsistencies in his story. John's lawyers immediately began to build a defense strategy, emphasizing problems with translation and claiming that their client did not understand the nature of the charges due to the language barrier. This tactic was aimed at prolonging the judicial process and creating grounds for possible appeals in the future. Parallel to John's interrogations, investigators continued to collect and analyze evidence. A key element of the investigation became the recordings from surveillance cameras installed in the residential complex where John and Valentina lived. The video recordings showed how on January 19th, John checks into the apartment with a blue suitcase, which later becomes the instrument of the crime. On January 20th, cameras recorded the couple entering the building together, which was the last time Valentina was seen alive. Particular attention was drawn to footage from the early morning of January 22nd. It shows John wheeling out a heavy blue suitcase covered with a blanket on a cart. He loads it into the rented car with obvious difficulty, indicating the significant weight of the contents. Further recordings showed the route of John's car through the city, including a stop near the place where Valentina's body was later found. These video evidences became key in establishing the chronology of events and John's connection to the crime. The forensic examination also provided important evidence. Analysis of Valentina's body confirmed that death occurred from strangulation, and numerous bruises and abrasions indicated a brutal attack. Experts suggested that the attacker might have received scratches from the victim's nails, which corresponded to the injuries found on John's face. This evidence, along with John's sudden escape and his inconsistent explanations, created a solid basis for the prosecution in the murder of Valentina Tres Palacios. During the investigation, new details of Valentina's personal life emerged, shedding light on possible motives for the crime. Investigators discovered that since November 2022, Valentina had been maintaining a romantic relationship with a successful businessman, Santiago Luna. Santiago, who lived in a luxurious penthouse and owned a fleet of expensive cars, represented an alternative to Valentina's relationship with John. These relations remained a secret from John, but as investigators suspect, he might have learned about them shortly before the tragedy. Analysis of Valentina's correspondence with friends showed that she was planning to end her relationship with John. She complained about his controlling behavior and expressed doubts about their future due to the large age difference. These facts allowed the investigation to form a theory about the motive for the crime. Probably John, upon learning about Valentina's intentions to leave him and about her relationship with another man, acted under the influence of strong jealousy and anger. On January 28, 2023, the first court hearing in the case of John Poulos took place. The session attracted significant public and media attention, turning into a high-profile event in Colombia. At the hearing, John was officially presented with charges of murdering Valentina Tres Palacios and concealing evidence. Prosecutors emphasized the brutality of the crime and presented the court with key evidence, including surveillance camera footage and results of the forensic examination. John's defense immediately began to apply delaying tactics. The lawyers filed a complaint about the alleged illegal detention of their client at the Panama airport, claiming that his rights were violated. They also insisted on translation problems, stating that John did not understand the essence of the charges due to the language barrier. John's behavior during the hearing raised additional questions. He laughed at inappropriate moments, which prompted the judge to reprimand him. This was seen by many as a sign of disrespect for the court and the seriousness of the situation. Prosecutors presented a theory that John had planned the crime in advance. They drew attention to the short rental period of the apartment, only 4 days, which contradicted his promises to Valentina about long-term cohabitation. The trial promised to be long and complex, given the seriousness of the charges and the international nature of the case. John faced up to 40 years in prison if found guilty. The murder of Valentina Tres Palacios caused wide resonance in Colombian society and beyond. This tragedy raised important questions about women's safety, toxic relationships, and feminism. Numerous civic organizations organized memorial events for Valentina, drawing attention to the problem of violence against women. Hashtags in support of domestic violence victims appeared on social media, as well as calls to strengthen legislation in this area. Valentina's story became a catalyst for many women who began sharing their own experiences of toxic relationships and violence. This led to an increase in the number of appeals to crisis centers and support hotlines. Media coverage of the case was intensive, with detailed analysis of Valentina and John's relationship. Psychology and sociology experts discussed signs of toxic relationships that could be noticed in their history, emphasizing the importance of early recognition of warning signals. The case also sparked discussions about safety on social media and dating apps, as it was through Tinder that Valentina met John. This led to calls for strengthening security measures on such platforms. The tragic death of Valentina Tres Palacios had a significant impact on Colombia's club and entertainment industry. Event organizers and club owners began to review their security policies, especially regarding the protection of female workers. Many clubs introduced new security protocols, including enhanced visitor control and the creation of safe zones for women. Some establishments began offering special training for staff on recognizing signs of dangerous behavior and responding to potential threats. In the music community, initiatives to support women DJs and performers emerged. Festivals and concerts dedicated to Valentina's memory were organized, featuring exclusively female artists. The fashion industry, in which Valentina also worked, responded by creating campaigns against violence against women. Some brands launched special collections, with part of the profits directed to support organizations fighting domestic violence. This tragedy also affected the perception of the DJ profession in Colombia. Many began to realize the risks faced by women in this field, especially when it comes to late-night performances and interaction with strangers. Overall, Valentina's death became a turning point for many aspects of Colombia's entertainment industry, prompting serious changes and rethinking approaches to safety and equality. The Amato family lived in the small town of Chuluata, Florida, with a population of just 2,500 people. They resided in a spacious house situated on a plot of land slightly over 1 hectare. The heads of the family were Chad and Margaret Amato, who got married in 1986. At that time, Margaret already had a 3-year-old son, Jason, from a previous marriage. Chad adopted the boy and raised him as his own. The couple was very close. Later, they had 2 more sons together, Cody in 1987 and Grant in 1989. 59-year-old Chad worked as a pharmacist his entire life and was also passionate about computers, calling himself a self-taught computer guru. His 61-year-old wife, Margaret, held the position of senior operations manager at a large company. The woman loved horses and devoted her free time to rescuing and rehabilitating racehorses. The Amato family was financially well off. The parents had prestigious jobs, and the children never knew any need from an early age. Overall, the family seemed quite happy and prosperous. Grant Amato was the youngest of Chad and Margaret's 3 sons. He grew up as a rather shy and clumsy child, finding it difficult to make friends. In fact, his only friend was his older brother Cody, with whom Grant had a very close relationship. They went to school together, played sports together, and even chose the same profession. Both became nurse anesthetists. However, in June 2018, when Grant was 29 years old, problems began in his life. He worked at a hospital from which he was fired after being caught stealing 8 vials of a potent painkiller. Grant claimed that he took the medications for patients to whom doctors prescribed an insufficient dose, but the management did not believe this and brought charges against him. Although the charges were later dropped for lack of evidence, Grant lost his job. This event greatly affected the young man's mental state. He became a recluse, withdrew into himself, and spent all his time at home. Grant fell into depression, slept all day, and played video games at night. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that he had no money at all. His parents tried to support their son, gave him money to live on, but in return asked him to find a job. These requests only irritated Grant and led to quarrels. Meanwhile, Grant found solace in communicating on the internet. He spent a lot of time on adult sites, especially those where he could chat with webcam models. And it was there that he met the girl who changed his life. She turned out to be a Bulgarian webcam model who called herself Sylvie. Grant fell in love with her at first sight. But it was not a bright and joyful feeling, but more like a morbid obsession. Amato sought to communicate with Sylvie as much as possible. He was willing to pay any amount of money just to see her and talk to her. At first, Grant spent several $100s a day on private chats with the girl. Then the sums increased to thousands of dollars. He also bought and sent Sylvie expensive lingerie and sex toys, which she was supposed to wear during their communication. Grant believed that he and Sylvie had a real relationship. He told her that he lived in a luxurious house, drove a BMW, and was a successful professional gamer who earned huge amounts of money. Of course, the girl believed this after all. Grant sent her huge sums, up to $10,000 at a time. In reality, almost all this money belonged to Grant's parents and brother. At first, he spent their cash savings which relatives gave him, hoping to support him. When the money ran out, Grant began to steal. He stole his father's and brother's credit cards and used them to pay for communication with Sylvie. In total, Amato spent about $200,000 on this over the course of several months. Communicating with the webcam model became a real addiction for Grant. He could not do without daily conversations with her and was ready to do anything to pay for them. For the sake of this, he even stole the credit card of Cody's friend Jericho when the three of them were vacationing in Japan. While his friends were having fun, Grant sat in the hotel in front of the computer, spending Jericho's money on conversations with Sylvie. At the end of 2018, Grant's parents became curious about the constant debiting of funds from their cards. The son lied to them, saying that he was allegedly trying very hard to promote his channel on Twitch and become a successful professional gamer. But in reality, he was spending this money on communicating with the webcam model. Chad and Margaret believed that their son had really come to his senses and was trying to start earning money. They wanted to support him and continued to give him access to their money. But after some time, they discovered that Grant was simply deceiving them and spending money not at all on developing a gamer career. In December of the same year, when Grant returned from a vacation in Japan with his brother Cody, his parents had a serious conversation with him. They informed their son that they would no longer give him money and forbade him to use their cards. Also, Chad and Margaret insisted that Grant stop communicating with Sylvie and look for a job. But Grant did not want to listen to anything. These demands from his parents infuriated him incredibly. During an argument, Chad, who had always been rather domineering and impulsive, kicked Grant out of the house. The enraged son slammed the door and fled the house in his car. Margaret was very worried about Grant's mental state and feared that he might harm himself. She called the police and reported that her 29-year-old son had run away from home and possibly intended to commit suicide. To prove her words, Margaret showed a message from Grant, who wrote to her, "I'm very tired of everything. I will deal with it in my own way." It later turned out that Grant had gone to his Aunt Donna, who lived 30 minutes away from them. The woman sheltered him for a few days until he calmed down. However, soon the aunt noticed that money began to disappear from her bank card as well over the course of a few days. Grant stole hundreds of dollars, which he again spent on communicating with Sylvie. He accessed his uncle and aunt's accounts while they were sleeping and transferred money to pay for private chats with the webcam model. When the deceived aunt called Chad, he burst into tears. The man confessed that Grant had driven him into debt for $150,000, and he did not know how to deal with it. He asked his sister not to go to the police about this, promising to return all the money stolen from her. Eventually, at the end of December 2018, Grant's father and older brothers staged an intervention for him. They gave the young man an ultimatum: either he goes to a rehab clinic for addiction treatment, or he will be deprived of financial support and permission to live in their house. Grant agreed and was sent to the clinic for a 60-day rehabilitation program for which the family paid $15,000. While undergoing treatment, Grant was deprived of internet access and the ability to communicate with Sylvie. Meanwhile, his parents, trying to figure out what had happened to their son, began to examine his correspondence with the girl. From the text of the messages, they realized that Grant was not only spending a huge amount of money on her, but had also been lying to her all this time about who he was and what he did. To put an end to this, Grant's father contacted Sylvie and revealed the whole truth to her. He informed the girl that Grant was an unemployed 29-year-old guy who lived with his parents and stole their money to impress her. This was also reported to other men from the online community around Sylvie. Chad insistently asked the girl to stop communicating with his son when he returned home from rehab, and she allegedly promised to do so. Grant's treatment at the rehab center was supposed to last 60 days, but after just 2 weeks, he voluntarily left the clinic and returned home, assuring everyone that he had been cured of his addiction. This happened on January 5th, 2019. His parents met Grant with a serious conversation. They informed him that they were ready to allow him to live in their house, but under certain conditions. Grant had to get a job, stop stealing money, and never communicate with Sylvie again. Also, Chad and Margaret reported that from now on, they would take the computer out of his room every evening so that he could not go online at night without everyone noticing. All these rules were clearly written on a sheet of paper, which Grant was given to sign. The 30-year-old young man looked depressed, but supposedly agreed to comply with these requirements. He told his parents that he would find a job soon and stop talking to the webcam model. However, the news that his father had told Sylvie the whole truth infuriated Grant. He felt a strong resentment towards Chad and Margaret for interfering in his relationship with the girl. Despite his promises, Grant did not intend to stop communicating with Sylvie. When his parents took away his smartphone, he would ask his mother for her phone, allegedly to watch some videos on YouTube. Margaret sometimes gave her mobile phone to her son, not suspecting that he was using it to write to the webcam model on Twitter. Soon, Chad found out about this. On January 24th, another big fight took place between him and Grant. The father accused the son of violating the agreements reached and demanded that he immediately get out of the house. The enraged Grant left the house, slamming the door loudly. On the same day, January 24th, 2019, Grant's older brother Cody returned from his hospital shift half an hour earlier than usual. He read a message from his parents about another fight with Grant and decided to go straight home to settle the situation. Cody, who had always been the peacemaker in the family, hoped to calm his parents down and convince them to give Grant another chance. The next morning, on January 25th, Cody's co-workers became worried when he did not show up for his shift and did not answer phone calls. This was extremely atypical for the responsible and punctual young man. The medics turned to the police and asked them to send a patrol to check on the Amato family's house. The police officers who arrived at the scene banged on the doors and windows, but no one answered. Looking inside, they did not notice any signs of robbery or break-in, but the house was suspiciously quiet. After coordination with the leadership, the patrol officers broke down the door and entered the house. At that moment, a horrific sight awaited them. 59-year-old Chad Amato was lying in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. He had been shot twice in the back of the head when he had apparently just returned from work and was preparing dinner. In the next room, in a chair in front of the computer, sat 61-year-old Margaret Amato, shot in the temple. A half-empty glass of white wine stood nearby. 31-year-old Cody was found dead on the threshold between the garage and the room. He had been killed with a shot to the forehead and was lying in a fetal position in a pool of his own blood. An examination of the crime scene showed no signs of struggle or robbery. All the family's valuables remained untouched. It seemed that the killer had caught his victims by surprise and dealt with them one by one. Some details, such as the bloody trail on the floor next to Chad's body, indicated that he had tried to escape or get to the phone after the first shot, but the killer had caught up with him and finished him off. In the absence of signs of an outsider's intrusion into the house, the main suspect for the police immediately became Grant Amato, who was not among the killed family members. The police declared Grant wanted. Soon his car was spotted parked near one of the hotels in Orange County, a 30-minute drive from the house. When the operatives burst into the room, they saw Grant lying on the floor in medical clothing. He did not resist arrest. During a search of Grant's room, credit cards of his deceased father and brother were found, as well as a foreign passport, which indicated the suspect's intention to flee the country. During interrogation, Grant behaved surprisingly calmly. He told the police about his tense relationship with his domineering father, his addiction to communicating with the webcam model, and his relative's prohibition on seeing his beloved girl. But at the same time, he never once inquired about the condition of his relatives. Only when investigators showed him pictures from the crime scene did Grant burst into tears. He continued to deny his involvement in the murder of his parents and brother. However, his testimony regarding the events of January 24th turned out to be rather contradictory and did not stand up to any criticism. The investigation into this triple murder lasted several months. Investigators managed to gather a number of pieces of evidence that testified against Grant Amato. Forensic experts established that the bodies of the deceased had been specially moved to stage a picture of a murder-suicide by one of the family members. A study of the victim's phones showed that after killing his father, Grant sent messages from his smartphone to Cody to lure his brother home for a massacre. A digital analyst reconstructed the chronology of events on the fatal evening. According to his conclusions, Grant first shot his mother while she was working at the computer. Then he lay in wait for his father and shot him as soon as he returned from work. After dealing with his parents, Grant waited in ambush for Cody for several hours. When his brother entered the house, the killer sent him to the next world with a shot to the forehead. The investigation established that after the triple murder, Grant copied his correspondence with Sylvie onto a flash drive, and around midnight, using the fingerprint of his dead father, he entered his banking account and transferred money from there to his credit card. He later used these funds to renew his premium subscription on the site where his beloved webcam model worked. Such behavior resembled the actions of a true sociopath. In addition, an 8-page manifesto text was found on Grant's laptop, which he had written shortly before the crime. In it, the killer accused his parents of interfering with his relationship with Sylvie, to whom he was going to confess his love. Grant did not hide his hatred for his relatives, calling his father a controlling tyrant who deserved punishment. On July 23, 2019, the trial of Grant Amato, who was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, began in the Seminole County Court. Prosecutors emphasized that the cold-blooded shooting of his parents and brother was a carefully planned revenge by the young man who was forbidden to communicate with the webcam model. The prosecution presented a number of pieces of evidence of Grant's guilt. In particular, his 8-page message in which he confessed his hatred for his family. Witnesses spoke about the young man's addiction to communicating with Sylvie, on which he spent insane amounts of money. Cody's co-worker recounted how that day his friend had suddenly left work after receiving a message from his father. Investigators demonstrated how Grant used the bank card of his already dead father to pay for premium access to the webcam model. In turn, Grant's lawyers built their defense on the absence of direct evidence of his guilt. They noted that no traces of Grant's DNA or fingerprints were found at the crime scene. The gun with which the members of the Amato family were shot was also not found. According to the defense, Grant could have written his manifesto in a state of passion, without any real intention of killing his relatives. The trial lasted almost 3 weeks. During this time, several dozen people testified in the courtroom: relatives, friends, colleagues of the deceased, as well as police officers and forensic experts. The prosecution insisted on life imprisonment for Grant Amato, while the defense asked for leniency, citing his lack of a criminal record. On August 12, 2019, the jury found 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty on all counts, 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. Judge Jessica Rexidler announced the sentence to the defendant: 3 life sentences to be served concurrently, without the possibility of parole. Mr. Amato, this was a deliberate and premeditated act on your part. You took the lives of 3 people who loved you the most because of your own obsession. Your actions were not the result of some momentary hatred. It was a planned revenge against those who, in your opinion, stood in the way of your unhealthy desires and fantasies. And the court believes that you pose too great a threat to society to ever be released, the judge stated. After hearing the verdict, Grant Amato showed no emotion. His face remained as impassive as it had been throughout the entire trial. Moreover, during his last words, the defendant did not mention his deceased parents and brother even once. Instead, he continued to talk about his obsession with the webcam model Sylvie, and that one day they would still be together. With this, the chilling story of the Amato family came to its tragic finale. Grant ended up behind bars, but not because of his addiction to the internet and webcam models. He went to prison for the brutal murder of his closest people, his father, mother, and brother. And judging by his last words in the courtroom, even life imprisonment did not make him repent and apologize for what he had done. Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. On a quiet night of July 31st, 2022, the small town of Strongsville, Ohio, witnessed a tragedy that would forever change the lives of many people. That night, no one could have predicted that a regular ride of 3 young individuals would turn into a fatal event that would claim the lives of 2 of them and permanently shatter the fate of the 3rd. Mackenzie Shirilla, a 17-year-old girl, got behind the wheel of her 2018 Toyota Camry. Next to her was her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, and in the back seat was their mutual friend, 19-year-old Davian Flanagan. They were returning from a party, full of plans for the future and the joy of life. None of them knew that this ride would be the last for the 2 young men. A quiet street, a night in the city, 3 friends in a car. It seemed like an ordinary scene for a summer night. But in the air, there was already an elusive premonition of trouble, which perhaps the passengers of the vehicle could feel but could not or did not want to acknowledge. This night would forever alter the lives not only of the participants of the ride, but also their families, friends, and the entire community of Strongsville. Mackenzie Shirilla was born in 2004 to Natalie Shirilla and John Stephen in Strongsville, Ohio. She was the 3rd child in the family, where parents tried to provide their children with everything necessary for a happy childhood. From an early age, Mackenzie was the family favorite. Parents often forgave her various pranks and mischief, trying to raise their daughter in an atmosphere of love and care. However, such excessive indulgence had its negative consequences. Even in childhood, Mackenzie began to show signs of a difficult character. She got used to her parents always fulfilling her demands, and gradually, she developed a sense of impunity. The girl became increasingly demanding and selfish, not considering the feelings and desires of others. As Mackenzie grew older, her character became more and more complicated. She easily lost her temper, behaved arrogantly and impatiently, often argued, and could even get into fights. Mackenzie disregarded the opinions of others, believing that her word should always be the last. At school, Mackenzie often got into trouble. Together with her friends, she engaged in vandalism, organized pogroms, participated in fights, and sometimes even stole. Several times the girl came to the attention of the police, but usually everything was limited to warnings and educational talks. In high school, Mackenzie began experimenting with alcohol and drugs. She often posted provocative photos on social media where she was smoking or drinking alcohol, accompanied by equally provocative comments. Her parents seemed not to notice or did not want to notice the obvious problem, attributing everything to adolescence. Dominic Russo was born on September 24, 2001, in Strongsville, Ohio, to Christina and Frank Russo. He was the fourth of 7 children in the family. Despite the large number of children, the parents tried to give attention to each of them, raising them with love and care. From an early age, Dominic showed diverse talents and interests. He did well in school, actively participated in sports, and tried to lead a healthy lifestyle. Dominic dreamed of a career in the music industry and, at a young age, began writing and performing his own songs. He entered a local university, specializing in performing arts producer, striving to fulfill his dream of becoming a famous music producer. Dominic and Mackenzie first met when the girl was in her senior year of high school. It happened at one of the parties in the company of mutual friends. Despite the difference in age and character, the young people felt a mutual attraction. Dominic was attracted to Mackenzie by her intelligence, good manners, and interesting conversations. Mackenzie, in turn, was enchanted by Dominic's bright appearance and ability to make an impression. In the fall of 2021, Mackenzie and Dominic started dating. The first months of their relationship were filled with romance and mutual admiration. They spent a lot of time together, appearing everywhere holding hands and openly demonstrating their tender feelings. The young couple introduced each other to their parents, who reacted differently to this union. Over time, Dominic began to notice oddities in his girlfriend's behavior. Her audacious antics and desire for everyone around her to do only what she wanted did not cause him much concern at first. He attributed everything to her young age and desire to attract attention. Gradually, the relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic became increasingly tense. Mackenzie demanded complete submission to her desires from her boyfriend. If he disagreed with her on something, she made scenes, tantrums, and behaved like a spoiled child. In public, Mackenzie still tried to control herself, but when alone with Dominic, she unleashed a storm of emotions on him, sometimes even throwing punches. When Mackenzie's behavior became completely unbearable, Dominic decided to end this toxic relationship. He suggested taking a break and sorting out their feelings. However, Mackenzie did not accept this decision. She made a public scene in front of their mutual friends, screaming, threatening Dominic that she would kill him if he left her, threatening to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions only strengthened Dominic's confidence in the correctness of his decision to break up. Davian Flanagan, a 19-year-old friend of Dominic and Mackenzie, had a difficult childhood. He was adopted along with his 2 younger siblings from foster care when they were little. Despite the challenging circumstances, Davian maintained his natural kindness and positive attitude towards life. Davian and Dominic became close friends. They shared many common interests and values. When Dominic started dating Mackenzie, Davian also got to know her. He became part of their shared circle of friends, often spending time together with the couple. Despite his complicated past, Davian had big plans for the future. He dreamed of entering a barber school and eventually opening his own salon in the city. Davian was known as an incorrigible dreamer with a heart of gold, always ready to help his friends, even in the middle of the night. On July 30th, 2022, Mackenzie suggested to Dominic that they go to a party organized by their mutual friends. It was supposed to be an opportunity to have fun and show everyone that they were together again. Dominic agreed, still not sensing any threat from Mackenzie. At the party, the couple looked happy. They held hands, openly displayed their affection, and seemed like a harmonious pair. Friends were genuinely pleased with their reunion, noting that they looked great together. Throughout the evening, the young people had fun, danced, and consumed alcohol. Mackenzie, moreover, secretly took a dose of drugs, as she later explained, for courage. The party lasted until morning, and no one suspected what a tragedy would soon occur. Around 5 o'clock in the morning on July 31st, Mackenzie and Dominic decided to go home. At that moment, Davian approached them and asked for a ride. Despite the fact that this was not part of Mackenzie's plans, she agreed, not wanting to arouse suspicion. The three friends got into the 2018 Toyota Camry Mackenzie behind the wheel, Dominic in the passenger seat and Davian in the back. Leaving the party venue, Mackenzie initially drove the car calmly, observing the traffic rules. On the main street, she drove slowly, not exceeding the speed limit and trying not to attract attention. At a traffic light, she stopped, although the road was empty. After the traffic light turned green, Mackenzie abruptly accelerated and turned onto a poorly lit secondary road leading to an industrial zone. The vehicle's speed rapidly increased, reaching over 100 miles per hour. According to the car's black box data, Mackenzie pressed the gas pedal to the floor and made no attempt to brake. The car crashed into a brick wall of a building in the industrial zone of Strongsville at an enormous speed. The impact was so severe that the vehicle was completely wrecked. Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan, who were not wearing seatbelts, died on the spot from their injuries. Mackenzie, who was the only one wearing a seatbelt, survived the crash. She was found unconscious, trapped in the driver's seat. Her fuzzy Prada slipper was stuck on the gas pedal. Rescuers pulled her from the mangled car and urgently transported her to the hospital. The news of the tragic deaths of Dominic and Davian came as a shock to their families and friends. Dominic's parents, brothers, and sisters were devastated by the loss. Davian's adoptive family also could not believe what had happened. The young men's friends and acquaintances gathered together to support each other and honor the memory of those who died. The tragedy shook the entire town of Strongsville. Local residents were shocked by what had occurred. Many knew Dominic and Davian personally or through their families. The community united to support the relatives of the deceased and express their condolences. Mackenzie's behavior after the accident caused surprise and outrage in many. After being discharged from the hospital, she quickly returned to her usual way of life. Already in September, she attended a concert of her favorite band in a neighboring city, appearing there in a wheelchair, but with bright makeup and provocative clothing. She continued to actively use social networks, posting selfies with friends and videos from parties. Friends and acquaintances of Dominic and Davian were shocked by Mackenzie's behavior. They could not understand how she could have fun and live her usual life after what had happened. Many believed that her behavior indicated a lack of remorse and indifference to the deaths of close people. The investigation began immediately after the tragedy. The police thoroughly examined the scene of the accident, collecting all possible evidence. Drugs and digital scales were found in Mackenzie's pockets, indicating possible use of prohibited substances before the trip. Investigators managed to obtain footage from surveillance cameras that captured part of the car's route before the accident. The video showed that Mackenzie initially drove the car normally, observing traffic rules, but then suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial zone and sharply increased her speed. During the investigation, friends and acquaintances of Mackenzie and Dominic were questioned. Many spoke about the couple's complicated and toxic relationship. One witness reported hearing Mackenzie threaten to kill Dominic in a car crash 2 weeks before the tragedy. Analysis of the car's black box showed that Mackenzie pressed the gas pedal to the floor and made no attempt to brake before the collision. This, along with other evidence, led investigators to conclude that the accident might not have been accidental, but an intentional action on Mackenzie's part. On November 4, 2022, Mackenzie was taken into custody. Her lawyers chose a line of defense, claiming that the accident was a tragic misfortune. They insisted that Mackenzie had no intention of killing anyone and was herself a victim of circumstances. The prosecution presented evidence to the court that, in their opinion, indicated the intentional nature of Mackenzie's actions. They referred to the black box data, video from surveillance cameras, as well as testimony about Mackenzie's previous threats against Dominic. Relatives and friends of Dominic and Davian testified in court. They spoke about the character of the boys, their dreams and plans for the future, which the tragedy had cut short. These emotional testimonies made a strong impression on everyone present in the courtroom. Experts presented the court with the results of Mackenzie's blood analysis, which showed the presence of alcohol and drugs above the permitted level. Technical data on the condition of the car and the nature of the accident were also presented, confirming the version of intentional actions by the driver. In their closing statements, Mackenzie's lawyers insisted that she had no intention of killing anyone and deeply regretted what had happened. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that Mackenzie's actions were deliberate and planned and demanded the maximum punishment. During the trial, Mackenzie displayed various emotions. Sometimes she cried, looking depressed and confused. At other moments, she seemed calm and even indifferent. The court and those present tried to understand whether these emotions were sincere or an attempt to evoke sympathy. In her final words, Mackenzie addressed the families of Dominic and Davian, expressing deep regret for what had happened. She claimed that she would never have done it intentionally and that Dominic was the love of her life. Mackenzie also said that she would like to remember the details of that trip, but her memory had erased those recollections. On August 21, 2023, the judge announced the verdict. Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty on all 12 counts of the indictment, including murder, aggravated vehicular homicide, and possession of controlled substances. The judge emphasized that the video clearly demonstrated the goals and intentions of the defendant, and that her actions were not accidental, but intentional and carefully planned. When the judge announced the sentence, Mackenzie cried and looked shocked. Her mother, Natalie Shirilla, was also stunned by the court's decision and continued to insist on her daughter's innocence. The families of Dominic and Davian expressed mixed feelings. On the one hand, they felt some relief that justice had prevailed. On the other hand, they understood that it would not bring back their lost loved ones. This tragic story became a vivid example of how a dangerous combination of youth, unstable emotions, and drugs can lead to catastrophic consequences. It emphasizes the importance of a responsible attitude towards one's actions and awareness of their possible consequences. The relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic was a prime example of a toxic relationship. This story demonstrates how important it is to recognize the signs of unhealthy relationships in time and have the courage to end them before they lead to tragedy. This tragedy also highlights the importance of responsible driving. It reminds us that a car can become a deadly weapon in the hands of an irresponsible driver, especially under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The case of Mackenzie raises important questions about juvenile delinquency and ways to prevent it. It emphasizes the need for early detection of problematic behavior and the provision of appropriate assistance to adolescents and their families. This story also makes us think about the complex issue of the balance between justice and mercy in the judicial system, especially when it comes to young offenders. It raises questions about how society can simultaneously ensure justice for victims and give a chance for rehabilitation to those who have committed a crime. Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. This means that she will be able to apply for parole at the age of 34. Time will tell whether Mackenzie will use this period to rethink her actions and truly repent, whether she will be able to change and become a better person. The memory of Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan continues to live on in the hearts of their loved ones and friends. The families and friends of the deceased have organized several charity events in their honor to preserve the memory of the young men and their dreams. At the university where Dominic studied, a scholarship was established in his name for students in the music field. For the families of Dominic and Davion, the healing process has been long and difficult. They are trying to find the strength to move on while keeping the memory of their sons alive. Some family members have become active participants in community organizations that fight against drunk driving and advocate for road safety. The tragedy has deeply affected the community of Strongsville. Local authorities and educational institutions have initiated a number of programs aimed at preventing juvenile delinquency and combating drug use among young people. Additional lessons on road safety and responsible driving have been introduced in schools. This tragic story has become a painful lesson for many. It reminds us of the importance of a responsible attitude towards our actions, the danger of toxic relationships, and the detrimental influence of drugs. It also emphasizes how fragile human life can be and how quickly reckless decisions can lead to irreparable consequences. The case of Mackenzie Shirilla remains a subject of discussion and reflection. It poses complex questions to society about justice, responsibility, and the possibility of rehabilitation. Regardless of one's personal attitude towards this case, it serves as a powerful reminder of the value of every human life and the importance of conscious choice in each of our actions. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel. Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. On October 6, 2019, a horrific event occurred in Fort Myers, Florida, marking the beginning of a series of brutal crimes. 30-year-old Wade Stephen Wilson met 35-year-old Christine Melton at the Buddha Bar. Quickly hitting it off, they headed off with Christine's friends to continue the party at the home of their new acquaintance, Jason. There, passion ignited between Wade and Christine. When Christine was left alone with her new lover on the morning of October 7th, he viciously murdered her, strangling her in her sleep, wrapping her body in a sheet and stealing the victim's car, a gray Dodge Hellcat. This crime was just the start of Wade Wilson's bloody odyssey. A few hours later, he would attack his girlfriend, Melissa Montanez, who would barely manage to escape the enraged sadist. Shortly after, Wilson would cold-bloodedly kill his second victim, 43-year-old Diana Ruiz, a mother of two, whom he deceitfully lured into the stolen car, strangled, and then ran over multiple times while she was still alive, turning her body into a bloody pulp. This shocking story would rock the quiet resort town of Cape Coral and make headlines across America. The investigation into Wade Wilson's actions on October 6th and 7th, 2019, would reveal chilling details about his life and crimes. It would come to light that the suspect had a troubled childhood, juvenile run-ins with the law, and toxic relationships with women. Even Wade's biological father, Stephen Testaseca, who had abandoned him as an infant, would be compelled to turn his son over to the police to stop the killing spree. Questions would arise about how the justice system and social services allowed a dangerous psychopath to remain free and wreak havoc for many years. The trial of Wade Wilson would become one of the most high-profile in the history of Lee County. It would last nearly 5 years and be accompanied by scandals, the defendant's escape attempts, and changes in his appearance. The jurors would have to deliver a verdict on a man who would openly boast about his crimes and threaten to commit new ones if set free. The fate of not only the brutal killer, but also the sense of justice and security of the entire community would hinge on their decision. Wade Stephen Wilson was born around 1994 into a dysfunctional family of teenagers who were too young and immature to raise a child. So the infant was given up for adoption to a couple, Candy and Steve Wilson, who already had 2 daughters and attended the same church as Wade's maternal grandparents. From a young age, the adopted son grew up troubled, constantly in conflict with the law. Wilson was first arrested in 2010 when he was about 16 years old. From then until the events described in 2019, he was detained more than 20 times for theft, fraud, hooliganism, and assaults. He repeatedly served time in prison, but always returned to his habitual way of life. Wade last found himself behind bars just a few months before the October murders. That term lasted about 3.5 months. It seemed that prison did not change his nature at all, but only hardened him in his criminal ways. Wilson's relationships with women were also marked by this destructive influence. He repeatedly exhibited cruelty towards his girlfriends, beating them, raping them, and threatening to kill them. Wade's ex-girlfriends described him as a monster who initially pretended to be sweet and loving, but then turned their lives into hell. One of them even warned that if Wilson wasn't stopped in time, he would certainly kill someone. Unfortunately, her prophecy came true with chilling accuracy. On the fateful evening of October 6, 2019, Wade Wilson was relaxing with his girlfriend Melissa Montañez at the Buddha Bar in Fort Myers, Florida. Around 8 p.m., an argument erupted between the couple. Melissa categorically refused to go visit someone, as Wade wanted. Enraged, he allegedly went to her Dodge Hellcat to get his things, but instead got behind the wheel and fled, abandoning the girl at the bar. As it later turned out, Wade had met and hit it off with 35-year-old Christine Melton at the Buddha Bar. He went with her to the home of their mutual acquaintance, Jason, where the company continued the party. In the early morning of October 7th, when the guests began to disperse, Christine was left alone with Wade. Christine's friend Stephanie did not notice any alarming signs in their behavior, and Christine herself assured that she was fine. Waiting for Christine to fall asleep, Wilson brutally killed her. He strangled her, wrapped her body in a sheet, and tried to discreetly carry it out of the house. But the stiffened corpse proved too heavy for him. So the killer simply left it at the crime scene, stole the victim's phone and car, and vanished. The police would later find out that before fleeing, Wilson had tried to load Christine's body into the trunk of her car but couldn't lift it because, in his own words, rigor mortis had already set in. Around 8:30 a.m. on October 7th, Wilson arrived at the Mila Salon Beauty Salon in Fort Myers in Christine's stolen Dodge Hellcat. There, his girlfriend Melissa Montañez, with whom he had quarreled the day before, was waiting for him. Wilson began demanding that she get in the car with him, but Melissa refused, which infuriated Wade. Right in the middle of the street, he lunged at the girl with his fists, knocked her to the ground, and began beating her face, biting her ear, and grabbing her throat. Wilson was so blinded by aggression that he didn't even put the stolen vehicle in park. It rolled forward and crashed into another car. However, Melissa was lucky to break free and escape from the enraged sadist. She ran into a neighboring establishment, pleading for help. Someone called the police, which ultimately scared Wilson off. He jumped back into Christine's car and fled the scene of the attack. The police took the beaten and bruised Melissa to the hospital. All the frightened woman could think about was whether she would live to see her son's 15th birthday, whom she hadn't even had time to greet that morning. Fleeing from pursuit, Wilson traveled over 6 miles from Fort Myers to Cape Coral, where he turned to his business acquaintance Josh, with whom he had once worked, for help. Wade begged to borrow money for a bus ticket to get out of town. When refused, an agitated Wilson exclaimed, "No, you don't understand, Josh. I killed people yesterday." Shocked by what he heard, Josh left the office and immediately called the police. The law enforcement officers who arrived at the call could not immediately find Wilson. While they were combing the area, they received alarming news. That same morning, around 8 a.m., 43-year-old Diana Ruiz, a mother of 2, had gone missing. The woman had not shown up for her usual morning shift at the local Moose Lodge, which was highly uncharacteristic of her. Later, her empty wallet was found on the side of the road. The police classified Diana's disappearance as suspicious and initiated a search. In the evening, Wade's anxious father, Stephen Testaseca, informed the investigators about his son's calls. During the first conversation, Wilson confessed to doing something terrible and that 2 people will never return. He called himself a killer However, Stephen took it as another of his son's gloomy fantasies and did not attach much importance to it. Only during the second call, when Wade described his crimes in detail, did the father realize the chilling truth. Wilson recounted how he met a girl at a bar, took her home, and when she fell asleep, strangled her. He later tried to load the body into the trunk of the victim's car but couldn't do it due to rigor mortis. Instead, the killer simply left the corpse in the house, took the keys, and fled in the stolen vehicle. Wade picked up his second victim on the street, allegedly asking for directions. As soon as the woman got into the car, he immediately attacked her and strangled her right behind the wheel. Then he found a deserted spot, dragged the still-living victim out of the car, and ran over her several times, crushing her body into bloody pieces. After hearing this gruesome confession, Stephen Testaseca could no longer remain silent. He felt obligated to stop his son before he ruined more lives. Under the pretext of ordering a taxi, the father found out where Wade was hiding and passed this information on to the police. Around 10 p.m., a SWAT team surrounded the house that the fugitive had illegally entered. The owners had just left that morning for a vacation in Ohio. After half an hour of negotiations, Wilson finally opened the door and surrendered to the authorities. On the morning of October 7, 2019, shortly after Wade Wilson's attack on Melissa Montanez, the Fort Myers police arrived at the scene of the incident at the Mila Spa Salon. There they found the beaten woman, who described her ex-boyfriend's attack in detail and reported that he had fled in a black Nissan Versa. Melissa also recounted Wade's history of domestic violence and drug addiction and expressed fears that if he had managed to drag her into the car, he would have certainly killed her. According to her, during the attack, Wilson repeatedly threatened to kill her. Concurrently, the Cape Coral police received a call about the suspicious death of 35-year-old Christine Melton at her home on Tudor Drive. At the crime scene, they found the body of the strangled woman, wrapped in a sheet and tied with her own clothes. There were obvious signs of a struggle in the house, and the victim's car was missing. The gruesome discovery prompted the police to classify this case as a homicide. During her interrogation, Melissa Montanez recalled that Wade had called her that morning from a number belonging to a Christine Melton from Cape Coral. This lead prompted investigators to think there was a connection between the attack on Melissa and Christine's murder. The police launched a massive manhunt for Wade Wilson, deploying all available resources. Closer to the evening, law enforcement learned that 43-year-old Diana Ruiz had gone missing in the Cape Coral area. The woman had left for her usual morning shift at the Moose Lodge but never showed up at work. This was highly uncharacteristic for the responsible mother of two. When her wallet was found on the roadside, the alarmed police declared Diana missing and initiated a search. That same day, the suspect's father, Stephen Testaseca, joined the investigation. He reported that he had received a chilling call from his son, who confessed to committing 2 murders. During the phone conversation, Wade Wilson described how he strangled the sleeping Christine Melton, tried to hide her body in the trunk, but couldn't do it due to rigor mortis. Instead, he simply left the corpse in the victim's house, took her car, and went in search of new prey. That turned out to be Diana Ruiz, whom Wilson picked up on the road, strangled right behind the wheel, and then, while she was still alive, dragged out of the car and brutally ran over several times with the vehicle. Upon learning from his son the address of the house where he was hiding, Stephen Testaseca immediately passed this information on to the investigators. On the evening of October 7th, the house was placed under siege, and after half an hour of negotiations, Wade Wilson was arrested. During a search of his temporary shelter and the stolen Dodge Hellcat, numerous pieces of evidence were found linking him to the murders of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz. Traces of blood, personal belongings, documents, and the deceased women's cell phones. Forensic experts also detected the suspect's fingerprints, DNA traces, and other biological materials on the victims' bodies. The testimonies of Melissa Montanez, Stephen Testaseca, and other witnesses also confirmed Wilson's guilt. The collected evidence left no doubt as to who committed these brutal crimes. The trial of Wade Wilson began in June 2024, almost 5 years after he committed the murders of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz. Such a long interval was due to numerous postponements and motions by the defense, as well as general restrictions on court operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. The defendant appeared before the jury significantly altered in appearance. Over the years in custody, he had acquired numerous tattoos on his face, including images of swastikas. The defense tried to file a motion for permission to use makeup to conceal these potentially juror-shocking tattoos, but Wilson refused to mask them. The trial was also accompanied by other incidents, including the defendant's attempted escape from custody. However, these incidents did not interfere with the substantive consideration of the case. Prosecutors presented the jury with a large volume of evidence confirming Wade Wilson's guilt. Dozens of witnesses were heard, relatives and friends of the murdered women, police officers, and forensic experts. They recounted the chronology and circumstances of the crimes and presented physical evidence found at the crime scenes. The testimony of Melissa Montañez, who miraculously escaped from Wilson and was the first to point to him as Christine Melton's killer, was read out. The jurors heard the story of Stephen Testaseca, the defendant's biological father. The man spoke about phone conversations with his son on the day of the murders, during which he confessed to the crimes. According to Stephen, Wade described in chilling detail, and even with a certain zeal, how he strangled the sleeping Christine, derisively calling her obscene words. He also boasted about the murder of Diana Ruiz, whom he strangled right behind the wheel and then, while she was still alive, dragged out of the car and crushed with the wheels. Unable to bear these horrific revelations, Testaseca decided to turn his son over to the police. The defense did not strongly object to the evidence and testimony. Instead, they focused on Wade Wilson's alleged diminished capacity, claiming that he had gone crazy and lost control of himself. The defendant's lawyers insisted that the murders were not premeditated, but were the result of a sudden outburst of aggression triggered by drug use. However, these arguments did not significantly sway the jury. On June 8, 2024, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Wade Wilson was officially convicted of 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz, as well as assault on Melissa Montañez, car theft, burglary, and petty theft. 2 weeks later, on June 22, 2024, the second phase of the trial began, deciding on the sentence. According to Florida state law, first-degree premeditated murder is punishable by either life imprisonment or death. Prosecutors insisted on the death penalty for Wade Wilson, citing the cruelty, audacity, and soullessness of his crimes. Considering the question of capital punishment, the jurors heard the so-called mitigating evidence, testimony in favor of Wade Wilson. His lawyers spoke about the defendant's troubled childhood, early drug addiction, and insisted on the influence of a toxic environment and the absence of strong family ties. However, even these arguments looked unconvincing against the backdrop of the chilling details of the murders and Wilson's blatant disregard for human life. After 2 days of intense deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. They did not reach unanimity on the application of the death penalty, but under the new legislation of the state of Florida, the votes of 8 out of 12 members of the panel were sufficient for such a decision. This threshold was overcome. 10 jurors voted for the execution of Wade Wilson, and only 2 were against it. Judge Nicholas Thompson, who presided over the trial, upheld the jury's decision. In delivering the final sentence, he emphasized the particular cruelty, audacity, and cynicism of Wilson's crimes. The judge stressed that the defendant had boasted about his actions, showed no remorse, and openly threatened to continue killing if released. Thus, Wade Wilson was officially sentenced to death by lethal injection. The news of the deaths of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz at the hands of Wade Wilson came as a real shock to their loved ones and the entire community of Cape Coral. The senseless and brutal deaths of 2 young women, mothers, friends, and colleagues, took a piece of the soul from everyone who knew and loved them. Flourishing lives were cut short in an instant, leaving behind unspeakable pain and emptiness. Stephanie, Christine's best friend, couldn't forgive herself for bringing a psychopathic killer into their circle. She constantly thought, what if I had acted differently that fateful night? Could I have saved Christine by being more cautious? These pangs of conscience gnawed at the girl every day, overshadowing the bright memories of their friendship. Christine's relatives, her mother, brother, and sister, didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to her until they identified the mutilated body in the morgue. They begged the heavens for a miracle, hoping that some unfortunate mistake had occurred, but the terrible truth was soon confirmed. Christine was gone. She had died a martyr's death at the hands of a monster whom she had carelessly trusted. The lives of her loved ones were divided into before and after, and their hearts were forever filled with grief, anger, and emptiness. An even worse fate befell Diana Ruiz's loved ones. For 4 days they did not know whether their beloved mother, daughter, fiancé, and sister was alive. They called hospitals, morgues, and police stations hundreds of times, hoping for a miracle. But when hope faded, they had to come to terms with the worst. Diana had died a martyr's death at the hands of a monster. Diana's fiancé nearly went mad with grief. He blamed himself for not driving his beloved to work that tragic morning. Now the man could only visit her grave daily and weep bitterly, remembering their happy moments. Diana's son could barely speak about his mother. Every word took an incredible effort. Each memory reopened the wound in his heart. The only consolation for the grieving families was that the killer of their loved ones would suffer the severest punishment. It would not bring back the deceased, but at least it would quench the thirst for justice and protect other people from the fate of Wilson's victims. The court sentence, life imprisonment or execution, was some satisfaction for their suffering. For Melissa Montañez, the end of this story was also bittersweet. She barely escaped becoming the 3rd victim of her insane ex-lover, and still could not comprehend how he had so masterfully pretended to be an innocent lamb. The girl shuddered at the thought of what would have happened if she had believed his sweet promises and given him another chance. Would she have ended up in a bag with her throat slit? Only now did Melissa realize what a predator she had been involved with, and she was glad that she had finally escaped his clutches. Although the emotional scars would remind her of this painful experience for a long time. The horrific case of Wade Wilson, Christine Melton, and Diana Ruiz became a tragic lesson for the entire society. It showed that evil can hide behind an attractive mask, pretend to be a friend and lover, that the inability to control impulses and toxic masculinity combined with drugs is a ticking time bomb. That indifference to violence and the objectification of women can lead to a bloody denouement. Perhaps if someone had stopped Wade during his first attacks on girls, Diana and Christine would be alive. If the police had responded more harshly to his beatings of ex-girlfriends, the next victims would not have joined the list of the dead. If we all were more attentive to signs of hidden aggression in the behavior of loved ones, we would more often prevent misfortune. Of course, some will say that maniacs like Wilson are simply incurably sick and dangerous beings, that no psychotherapy, medication, or upbringing will curb their thirst for blood. But isn't it worth at least trying to tame the demons inside a person with therapy and compassion before handing them over to the executioner? After all, every criminal is someone's son or daughter, and someone will cry for them just as the families of Christine and Diana do. This, of course, does not absolve Wilson of guilt and does not make him a victim of circumstances. He was fully aware of his actions and boasted about them, considering himself above societal morality. Such inhumans truly do not deserve to live among the people they despise. But shouldn't more effort be made to stop them before they become monsters? Perhaps then Christine, Diana, and hundreds of other victims would have lived to see gray hair in the family circle. This tragedy cannot be undone, but it must teach us something. To be more cautious when meeting strangers, to pay attention to alarming changes in the behavior of loved ones, to respond to the first signs of violence and toxicity in relationships, to support each other and together stand against evil, Only then will the deaths of Christine and Diana not be in vain, and the memory of them will inspire us to make our world safer. It is hard to overestimate the courage of the people who played a crucial role in exposing and punishing Wade Wilson. Melissa, a victim of his attacks and threats, found the strength to testify against the monster she shared a bed with. Stephen Testaseca, the criminal's father, made a terrible but correct choice. He turned his own son over to justice because he knew about the real danger to society. Police officers, forensic experts, and prosecutors did a titanic job of collecting evidence, analyzing DNA, and questioning witnesses to present Wilson's case to the jury in its entirety. Those 12 upstanding citizens had to listen to the horrific details of the atrocities, look at photos of the mutilated victims, and experience the grief of their loved ones. And despite the pressure of responsibility and compassion, they made a fair, albeit the harshest, decision. Society will always be in danger as long as psychopaths and sadists live among us. However, as long as there are people ready to confront evil, even at the cost of their own peace and security, it has no chance of winning. The memory of Christine Melton and Diana Ruiz will live on in the hearts of their relatives, friends, and colleagues who lost two wonderful women due to the whim of one scoundrel. Unfortunately, the list of innocent victims will still be replenished with names. Too much violence and madness are still hiding behind respectable masks. However, their deaths will not be in vain if they inspire society to be more vigilant, demanding, and caring towards each other. To stand together against evil, so that the world becomes at least a little safer for all of us and our children. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. On November 6, 2021, around 9 o'clock in the evening, a tragedy occurred in the upscale Atlanta suburb of Sandy Springs that shocked the public. In a luxurious mansion with 5 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, the married couple Kiana and Ronald Burns were found dead. The Atlanta Police Department received 2 alarming calls, the first from one of the couple's daughters reporting domestic violence, and the second from Kiana herself, who confessed to shooting her husband. When police officers arrived at the scene, they discovered that 44-year-old Kiana had shot her 46-year-old husband Ronald and then committed suicide. Kiana was still breathing when the first officers arrived, but despite attempts to save her life, she died at the scene. This event was the culmination of a complex family history that outwardly appeared successful and happy. Kiana and Ronald Burns were well known on social media as a successful couple of entrepreneurs, motivational speakers, and coaches. They had 8 children who were not at home at the time of the tragedy. The tragedy in Atlanta deeply affected not only the Burns family and friends, but also their numerous followers on social media. This story raised important questions about the gap between public image and reality, about the influence of social media on the perception of other people's lives, and about the hidden problems that can exist even in seemingly successful families. Kiana Renee was born on September 15, 1977 in Missouri. She spent most of her early childhood in this state. From a young age, Kiana dreamed of success and was determined to achieve it in life. After graduating from Riverview Gardens High School, Kiana decided to study cosmetology. She enrolled at St. Louis Community College in Florissant Valley, where she received her education in this field. During her studies, Kiana showed a real talent for cosmetology. She not only worked skillfully with her hands, but also easily found common ground with people, which became an important skill for her future career. Soon after completing her education, Kiana decided to start her own business. She founded a beauty salon which she named Critic Designs Beauty and Barber Salon. Despite lacking formal business education, Kiana demonstrated remarkable entrepreneurial abilities. She quickly understood how to promote her business and attract customers' attention. Initially, Kiana's client base consisted mainly of her family members and acquaintances. However, thanks to the high quality of her services and her ability to communicate with people, she quickly gained popularity among the residents of St. Louis. Her business developed slowly but steadily. Over the next 20 years, Kiana worked tirelessly to develop her salon. Thanks to her efforts and talent, Critic Designs became one of the most successful beauty salons in all of St. Louis. Kiana opened a second branch of her salon, which indicated the growth of her business. She never had a shortage of either clients or employees. By the time she met her future husband, Ronald Burns, Kiana was already a successful businesswoman with an established business and stable income. She had 3 children from previous relationships whom she loved very much. Relatives describe Kiana as a wonderful and loving mother. Ronald Burns was born on May 14, 1975 in St. Louis, Missouri. He was tall, maintained good physical shape throughout his life, and considered himself a successful businessman. During his time in Fashion High School, Ronald became passionate about basketball, which played a significant role in his life. In 1994, he participated in the state basketball championship. Ronald was known as a determined and competitive player. Perhaps it was this spirit of competition that pushed him to seek ways of self-improvement. After graduating from school, Ronald began to take interest in various business opportunities. He turned his attention to multi-level marketing companies and other schemes that promised quick success. Ronald believed that this would help him achieve financial prosperity. Despite his inclination towards dubious business schemes, Ronald had good communication skills and knew how to establish useful connections. He took on everything that could help him move forward. Ronald even began preaching Christianity in his own company, named after Glory's ministry. This allowed him to create his own community and make himself known to as many people as possible. Before meeting Kiana, Ronald had already been married. His first wife was a woman named Avis. In 2014, Ronald went bankrupt and married Avis. This marriage was not a happy one. Although Ronald appeared well-groomed and successful, in reality, he was unhappy in his marriage, and all his business ideas had failed. Interestingly, Ronald met Avis while trying to involve her in one of his dubious business schemes. Fortunately, she refused. Moreover, at the time of meeting Avis, Ronald was already in another relationship. However, due to his newfound interest in Avis, this relationship quickly ended. In his marriage with Avis, Ronald had 2 children. They lived together for 4 years, but over time, the relationship began to deteriorate. In 2014, the couple even participated in a popular reality TV show, Divorce Court, to resolve their family problems. Their story was aired. In the episode of Divorce Court, Ronald tried to present himself as an innocent victim of their relationship. However, it was obvious to everyone how self-confident and deceitful he was. Ronald even admitted on camera that he had cheated on his wife. Although it's unknown with whom specifically this happened, many believe that he was already cheating with Kiana. Avis, in turn, revealed that Ronald was extremely irresponsible with money, spending his wife's funds. Additionally, he couldn't keep any full-time job. Eventually, Ronald divorced Avis and almost immediately entered into a relationship with Kiana. Kiana actually represented a huge interest for Ronald, as she was a successful businesswoman with an established business at the time of their acquaintance. Of course, the man wanted to get involved in this business. As for Kiana, she was attracted to Ronald's confidence, ease, and ability to find and establish useful connections. Both saw each other as the perfect partner for creating a successful business, and with this in mind, decided to enter into a relationship. Soon they got married, and on September 13, 2015, their families officially became one. Kiana and Ronald spared no expense for the wedding celebration. They invited a large number of people, rented a huge banquet hall, and everything at their wedding was of the highest quality. Given that both spouses had huge egos, it's not surprising that they decided to arrange such a celebration. From the outside, Kiana and Ronald seemed like incredibly successful people, who, by joining forces, could really create something worthwhile. Moreover, Kiana's wealth and Ronald's experience seemed like a winning combination. However, over time, these expectations were not met. After getting married, Kiana and Ronald Burns began actively building their public image as a successful and happy couple. They use social media to showcase their luxurious lifestyle and business successes. Ronald presented himself as a successful businessman and financial consultant. He created a company called Six-Figure Ambition, which supposedly helped people achieve financial success. He also founded Legacy Financial Solutions. On the social media pages of these companies, photos of Ronald and Kiana were published, showing them posing next to products and attending various conferences. Among these were also photos of testimonials from supposedly satisfied clients. Kiana, in turn, continued to develop her beauty salon and also participated in her husband's business projects. She often posted photos showcasing a luxurious lifestyle. For example, on May 6, 2020, Kiana posted on Instagram saying that her husband had just gifted her a new Maserati Levante car. The couple regularly shared photos from expensive parties, travels, showing off expensive clothes, jewelry, and accessories. Kiana always appeared in photos with impeccable hair, makeup, and manicure. Moreover, Kiana and Ronald positioned themselves as devout Christians. To each of their posts, they added quotes from the Bible or other sacred writings that fit the content. The couple also published photos from their luxurious mansion, showing the public their wealth and family life in the minutest detail. On social media, Ronald constantly posted about his business ventures, claiming that all the affairs he undertakes become successful and profitable. He tried to create an image of an experienced entrepreneur and financial expert. The couple even shot their own reality series called Meet the Burns, where they showcased their supposedly ideal family life and successful business. This series was another way to maintain their public image as a prosperous couple. Despite the outward glitter and success, the reality of the Burns family's life was quite different. All of their joint business ventures eventually failed, and only Kiana's beauty salon remained afloat. From this point on, despite the lack of income from Ronald, the man continued to convince everyone around him of what a successful businessman he was. In reality, Ronald had been working for several years prior to these events at an American marketing insurance company called Primerica, which was engaged in fraudulently extorting money from middle and lower income families. The man even tried to involve members of his family, friends, and even parishioners in this fraudulent scheme to increase his status in the firm. Ronald clearly didn't receive enough money from this occupation. His income couldn't support his family. During his divorce from his first wife in 2014, it turned out that he couldn't afford monthly payments even in the amount of $250. However, now married to Kiana, Ronald gained access to her business and, unfortunately, to her money. The man believed that the only thing he lacked was financial support so that he could get on his feet. He decided that by using his wife's money, he could advance both himself and her in society. Thus, Ronald used his wife's hard-earned money to finally invest in the business he had always dreamed of. However, these firms again did not become successful. In essence, all Ronald did was spend Kiana's money, financing losing and fraudulent ideas. It's worth noting that the couple were not young and obligation-free people. They had 8 children. Despite the fact that they should have simply admitted defeat and closed Ronald's business, which did not generate income but only spent the already scarce money, they continued to convince everyone around them that the new business was successful, and they themselves were successful entrepreneurs. The constant desire of the Burns couple to maintain an image of successful and wealthy people led to serious financial problems. All the money they managed to earn was immediately spent on their supposedly luxurious lifestyle and on the desire to appear as someone they actually were not. Such wastefulness eventually led to the fact that by the end of 2019, they had become practically bankrupt. On December 19, 2019, Kiana and Ronald Burns officially filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. With this type of bankruptcy, the married couple had to liquidate part of their assets to pay off the debt. Thus, they lost about $20,000 in personal property. Although this amount seems significant, the amount of their debt was much larger. During their short marriage, the couple had accumulated debts of almost $500,000. Kiana's business couldn't pull them out of this state, and that's why they had to file for bankruptcy. To continue maintaining their public image as a successful couple, Ronald decided that their family should move to a bigger city. He believed that this would allow him to deceive more people with impunity. This became another unwise decision on his part, as Kiana's business was still thriving in their hometown and was the family's only source of income. Unfortunately, Kiana once again went along with her husband and agreed to move. So, in 2021, the Burns family moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Given their situation, any other family in their place would have chosen more modest and economical moving options, but the Burns family continued to spend money even now. That's why when moving, they rented a luxurious mansion with 5 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms in the wealthy suburb of Sandy Springs. Moreover, on social media, they didn't mention that they were just renting the house. In their posts, they assured followers that they had bought this house and immediately without savings, using the money they had earned from their businesses. After moving to Atlanta, the situation in the Burns family began to rapidly deteriorate. Obviously, all of Ronald's attempts to stay afloat had suffered another defeat. His business ideas were doomed from the start. At the same time, Kiana faced difficulties in adapting to the new place. All her surroundings, friends, and business remained in St. Louis, and so she began to feel completely isolated from her usual life. In addition, the relationship in the marriage also began to deteriorate sharply. It turned out that Ronald had again started cheating on his wife, which further shook Kiana's mental state. Ronald began to behave coldly towards her, and Kiana began to think that he had never been interested in her, and in reality, the man only needed her money. At some point, Ronald even published videos on his social networks in which he complained about difficulties in his marriage. This video was later deleted, but it led to a big fight between him and Kiana and almost to divorce. Such a revelation from the man shocked their followers, who thought their family was perfect. Kiana should have ended this marriage then and returned to life without Ronald. But for some reason, she continued to stay with him. At the same time, after moving to Atlanta, possibly after she learned about the infidelities, she herself found another man. Ironically, it was Ronald who ultimately filed for divorce, despite the fact that he himself had been unfaithful to his wife for some time. He considered her infidelity unforgivable and filed for divorce. In documents filed on October 10, 2021, Ronald cited Kiana's infidelity as the reason for the divorce. At the same time, the family and friends of the couple were not even aware of this. The man hid the truth from the public, probably thinking that if he spoke loudly about his wife's infidelity, it would clearly not contribute to his image as a successful person. Kiana, in turn, did not try to hide that something was wrong in their marriage. She stopped mentioning her husband on her Facebook page and soon began to post only selfies and videos of herself alone. Among the publications was also a video from a club, and it was obvious that Kiana was there alone. The most obvious statement from Kiana about problems in the marriage appeared online on October 20th, 10 days after Ronald filed for divorce. That day, Kiana went live on Facebook to talk about something much more serious. The bright smile she often displayed was now replaced by the expression of an exhausted, concerned woman. It became obvious that she was not in the best state. Just 3 days later, on October 23rd, she wrote on her page, "God is my witness. I would do anything to wake up from this nightmare," adding the hashtag, "God, I need strength." Kiana was on the verge of a nervous breakdown and clearly could no longer endure the hell that surrounded her daily. On November 6, 2021, the carefree silence of the wealthy Sandy Springs area was disturbed. First, screams were heard from the Burns house, and a little later, gunshots rang out. The police received a call shortly after. One of the Burns daughters reported domestic violence. A little later, Kiana herself called the police, telling them that she had just shot her husband. She asked for help to be sent as soon as possible. And although the police and ambulance squad arrived there in a short time, it turned out that after the call, Kiana had shot herself. At the moment when the first police officers and paramedics arrived, the woman was still alive, however. Despite all efforts, they were unable to save her. On that day, Kiana and Ronald died. Although the details of what actually happened in that house still remain a mystery, It's clear that the couple had been arguing for some time, and during the argument, Kiana pulled out a gun. What this ultimately led to shocked everyone. News of Kiana and Ronald Burns' death spread quickly through their large network of friends, colleagues, and social media followers. This event deeply shocked the public, especially those who had been following the couple's life on the internet. Many people in their circle couldn't understand or accept the reason for such an act, and were shocked by this outcome of events. After all, from the outside, the Burns family seemed perfect, a successful business, a large house, expensive cars, 8 children. However, this tragedy revealed the true situation in the Burns family. It turned out that behind the facade of success and happiness, there were serious financial problems, marital infidelities, and psychological difficulties. This story particularly affected the couple's children. All 8 of Kiana and Ronald's children were absent from home at the time of the tragedy. To some extent, this can be considered a lucky coincidence, as they did not witness the horrible scene and possibly avoided death themselves. However, these children are now left orphaned. The ending of this story is absolutely tragic. A self-confident, promiscuous fraudster took everything he could from his wife, who was too proud and angry to let him go. As a result, both spouses died, and their reputation, which they had so carefully maintained for the past few years, was destroyed in an instant. Now their followers learned what kind of people they had been all this time, and that they had been lying to them and to themselves all along. Yes, Kiana and Ronald managed to hide their secrets until the very moment of death, but it was clearly not worth it. This story raised important questions about the gap between public image and reality, especially in the era of social media. It showed how deceptive photos and posts on the internet can be, and how easily people can create an illusion of a perfect life. Moreover, the tragedy of the Burns family emphasized the importance of mental health and the need to seek help in difficult life situations. It also demonstrated how destructive financial problems and marital infidelities can be for family relationships. Finally, this story reminds us of the importance of honesty and authenticity in relationships with other people and with oneself. The desire to maintain an illusion of success and happiness can lead to catastrophic consequences, as happened in the case of Kiana and Ronald Burns. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today, we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. Behind the closed doors of an idyllic suburb in Wellington, Florida, a horrific tragedy unfolded that would forever change the lives of one family and shock the entire community. Neil Jacobson seemingly had it all: a successful career, a loving wife, and 2 wonderful sons. But beneath this perfect surface, dark secrets and deep inner demons lurked. The morning of January 23, 2010, was supposed to be a day of celebration, the birthday of the 2 boys. Instead, it turned into a day that would be forever etched in memory as one of the most horrific crimes in the city's history. The shocking events of that fateful morning marked the beginning of a long and painful investigation that would unravel a complex web of financial troubles, mental disorders, and questionable medical decisions. Neil Jacobson was born in 1961 to Harold and Goldie Jacobson. Harold was a former Marine, and Goldie was a homemaker. Neil had 2 sisters, Deborah and Robin. The parents raised their children in a strict but loving atmosphere. They were wonderful parents, although they had their own issues. Goldie suffered from depression for almost all of Neil's life, experiencing nervous breakdowns every few years but never seeking help. Harold suffered from anxiety, unwilling to leave his comfort zone. Those who knew the family said that Harold felt safe next to Goldie, and they rarely went anywhere without each other. Neil seemed to have his own problems too. He grew up with a desire to be the perfect child. He often felt anxious and depressed, trying to live up to his parents' expectations and his own. He was accepted to Montclair State University but dropped out without earning a bachelor's degree as the stress of studying became too much for him. But even despite all this, Neil could always rely on his father. Harold was Neil's rock. Neil married a woman named Frankie Silkoff. They met at an apartment complex gym where they lived in Bayside, Queens, New York. He was 29 and she was 33 when they met. At the time, both were stockbrokers. He worked at a small firm on Long Island. Frankie, on the other hand, worked at Shearson Lehman Brothers on Wall Street. Those who knew the couple said that Frankie loved Neil with all her heart. People described Neil as generous, happy, and constantly kind. He was generous and quick to help anyone with any needs. Neil described that they had the best relationship. They had been friends for a long time before they started dating. They loved doing everything together: scuba diving, bicycling, and traveling. Shortly after the couple started dating, Neil and Frankie moved from New York to New Jersey, where Neil was originally from. He started working as a mortgage broker again, which he had done before moving to New York. The couple got engaged on New Year's Eve in 1989, and on July 29, 1991, they got married. In 1993, Neil opened his own mortgage brokerage firm, and a few years later, Frankie joined him to help manage the business. Those who knew them said that the couple worked very well together in their real estate ventures. They were making good money, and things were going great. By 2002, the couple had purchased their first home in Wayside, New Jersey. However, at that time, the couple knew they wanted to have children. They went through several rounds of infertility treatments, but time and again, they were unable to conceive the children they had long dreamed of. But after disappointment, their dream finally came true. That same year, the couple had twins, Joshua and Eric. From then on, the boys became Neil and Frankie's lives. As is often the case with children, the children attended a Jewish school, where they thrived. Those who knew the family described Eric as more intellectual and serious, while Josh was more fun and playful. But both seemed to be the perfect duo, doing everything together. Both boys excelled in sports and had many friends. At the same time, Frankie and her sister were working on a children's book. They published their first book, Green Bean's Birthday, in December 2009. Frankie was learning sign language because Josh had a speech problem and communication was difficult for him. But even after having children, a large income, and a luxurious suburban home, Neil was not happy. He was tired of the weather in New Jersey and had been thinking about moving for a long time. His parents had moved to Florida a few years earlier, and his father was starting to get sick and unable to visit them up north. So finally, in the fall of 2003, Neil decided to buy property in southern Florida. The couple put down a deposit on a 4,000 square foot home under construction in Wellington Isles. But when they first put this money down, Neil said that to some extent, he made his wife believe that the house would not become their permanent residence. She really didn't want to move at all. So when construction was completed, Frankie didn't even want to put furniture in it, because she didn't want to live there. They would visit the house and stay there for vacation, but they would often just sleep on air mattresses because she didn't want to move and furnish the house. Neil continued his real estate ventures, eventually purchasing 4 condos, some in Lantana, Florida, which he said were investment properties. At the time, it all seemed like a great idea. The rental income they would receive from these investment properties was supposed to make them money and outweigh the cost of buying them. Real estate was selling very well at the time. It was a good time to get into this business, but it definitely did not bring the returns he had hoped for. After buying all this real estate, Neil desperately wanted to move to Florida, but Frankie still didn't want to. She liked New Jersey. That's where her friends were. That's where the kids went to school, and Joshua was getting therapy for his speech problems, but the financial burden was getting bigger and bigger for the family. By 2007, they tried to sell their house in Wayside, but again, real estate just wasn't selling very well at the time. So they rented it out and headed south. They sold the mortgage business they had started together, and by the 4th of July weekend in 2007, the Jacobsons arrived in Florida to settle there. But as they were going through this change, as many of us know, by 2008, the real estate bubble burst and many people found themselves in deep, deep trouble. In addition, after moving to Florida and with all this rental property being unprofitable, Neil's father Harold passed away. As I mentioned earlier, Harold was Neil's rock. He was devastated after losing his father, so again this stress was piling up and piling up. Due to the mortgage crisis of 2008, the real estate market was obviously not very profitable. Their business stalled and they weren't really making any money in real estate. Then the rental income they were receiving from their rental properties was well below what the developers had projected for them. Neil admitted that he was overzealous about the housing market when it was booming and made some bad purchases. Eventually, he became one of many who took out a stated income loan. This basically meant that he could write down a number to state his income and it wouldn't be verified. But it came at a very high interest rate and was very expensive, much more expensive than he originally thought. He was unable to repay the $225,000 he borrowed because he did not have a stable income. And he overstated his income to get this loan, which again, many people did, because if it's not verified, you can pretty much write whatever you want. After the market crash in September 2008, Neil decided he had had enough. He stopped making payments on the 3 condos they were renting out and let them go into default. They were done with them. The family went from $2.2 million in cash and equities to $2.3 million in debt in just 5 years. At the same time, by the summer of 2008, Neil began to feel sick. He was constantly fatigued, his body ached, and he just felt bad. So he went to the doctor, and that fall he was diagnosed with elevated thyroid-stimulating hormone levels, which basically means he had high thyroid levels. But the numbers weren't high enough for the doctor to think it was appropriate to treat it with medication. He was only 0.2 above normal, so his doctor said to wait 6 months and then come back for further testing. But over the next few months, the symptoms worsened. He gained weight, felt very dizzy, and became even more lethargic over time. So again, by January 2nd, 2010, he went to the doctor. But this time, he went to a different doctor. And Neil didn't know that his symptoms could be related to hormonal imbalance. So this other doctor did not order any blood tests. Instead, Neil was diagnosed with depression and transient peripheral vertigo. Because of this diagnosis, Neil was prescribed antidepressants and other medications to treat depression and anxiety. But it seemed that the new medications prescribed to Neil only made his condition worse. Frankie told Neil's sister Deborah that Neil was keeping her up at night. He was tossing and turning, getting up and down. There was even one night when she found him sleeping face down on the floor, and she thought he had even died at that point. Neil's depression only worsened, as did his anxiety and paranoia. Deborah described that Neil began to hallucinate. He wasn't sleeping. When he would lie down to rest, he would start hallucinating. He stopped wanting to leave the house. He stopped wanting to shower or even take care of himself. He couldn't take care of himself or his children. He would take medication around 8 p.m., sleep for about 2 hours, and then pace around the house for hours, waiting for Frankie to wake up so he could talk to her. And when she was up, he would talk and talk and talk endlessly. He would follow her around all day, and if she left the house and if he went with her, he would almost cower behind her and refuse to talk to anyone else or make eye contact with anyone. Then his hallucinations got worse. He started saying that he felt like Frankie was towering over him, that she was 10 feet tall. He said he was worried that the FBI was monitoring him and gathering surveillance and evidence against him. He was so worried about overstating his income on that stated income loan that he thought the FBI was going to barge in and drag him away in handcuffs and his children would be sent to an orphanage. He was convinced that the feds were going to show up at the children's birthday party on January 23, 2010. A few days before the incident, Goldie, Neil's mother, came over to their house for a visit. During this visit, Neil kept telling his mother over and over that he loved her. He kept hugging her and telling her that if anything happened, he loved her no matter what. Then by the 22nd, Frankie started begging Neil to come to the gym with her. She thought that maybe exercising would help him feel better, so he did. He went to the gym and sat on a stationary bike. But even before he started pedaling, he said his heart rate was 199 beats per minute. This is extremely fast for someone at rest, especially for someone his age. This shows just how much anxiety he was feeling and how paranoid he was at that moment. By the morning of January 23, 2010, it was time for the twins' birthday party. They were going to have their party at Fun Depot in Lake Worth. However, the boys would never make it to their 7th birthday party. That same morning, 911 received calls from a witness who reported seeing a 2002 silver GMC Envoy stopped in a ditch on the side of the road near the intersection of US 144 and West Atlantic Avenue. The witness said someone was slumped over the wheel and was unresponsive. Palm Beach County Fire Rescue responded to the call and found Neil Jacobson in the car slumped over the steering wheel. When he woke up, he was disoriented, asking officers where his gun was. Officers told him they took it from the car, but he kept looking around and trying to grab the gun. It was at this point that Neil told the officers that he had just killed his family. So the officers handcuffed Neil and took him to the hospital. In his room while receiving treatment, Neil was interviewed by 2:40 p.m. He was still very dazed and struggling to put together a thought. Throughout the interview, which lasted about 2 hours and 8 minutes, his speech was slurred. He repeatedly admitted to killing his family, but he kept saying that he loved his family and couldn't live with the thought of his wife or children paying for his crimes. In that interview, he said, "The guilt just got to me. It got messed up. It just got messed up. I had almost no choice. I felt the authorities were closing in on me." He continued, "I've never done anything like this before in my life. I've never hurt anyone." Something snapped. I was in a position where I literally had no choice. Of course, after Neil said he had just murdered his family, the investigation began. What I'm about to tell you is based on what Neil would later say about how he killed his children and his wife. On the morning of January 23, 2010, 49-year-old Neil woke up and around 6 a.m. climbed out of his bed. This woke up his wife of 19 years, Frankie. She watched, still groggy, as Neil walked over to their closet and stepped inside. She then asked him what he was doing in the closet. In the closet, Neil reached for the top shelf where he had hidden a loaded .38 caliber handgun. He then stepped out of the closet and pointed the gun at Frankie. He said, "Honey, it's over. It's just over. There's no other way." He started walking towards Frankie, who was now wide awake and begging for her life. She kept saying she didn't want to die and asked, "What about the boys?" But to that Neil replied, "Frankie, we all have to go." Then Frankie jumped out of bed and reached for the gun, and a struggle ensued. Both of them fell to the floor, and in that struggle, Frankie's front tooth was knocked out and her index finger was sliced open. Then Neil managed to point the gun at Frankie and he shot her 2 times in the face. Then, after shooting and killing his wife, he reloaded his gun with the ammunition he had put in his pocket. Yes, I went first to Eric's room where he was still asleep in his bed. Neil shot him 2 times in the face, but he didn't die immediately. So he walked over to his son, put a pillow over his face and shot him 2 more times. Then he reloaded the gun and went into the next room, Joshua's room. Neil put a pillow on Joshua's right cheek and shot him twice in the face. Then he turned around, walked past the boys' rooms and past Frankie's body and washed the blood off his hands. Then he grabbed the keys to his 2002 GMC Envoy. Then he said he went back to the children's rooms. He said he started trying to shake the boys awake, saying, "Come on, hurry up, get up. If you don't get up, I'm going to leave without you." So, because his 2 dead children were not waking up, he left. He walked outside and took a few old Vicodin pills he had, as well as the rest of the Zoloft and Xanax he had in the prescription bottles he had been prescribed. So, he took them all. As he was telling the police this story, he kept referring to a 5-page suicide note he had written. 1 copy was found in the closet. In that closet was a box of bullets, and next to it was the suicide note, typed and dated 3 days before the murders. After the police heard this heinous story, they searched Neil's car. There they found the key to Goldie's house, Neil's mother's house. It turned out that after killing his wife and children, He grabbed the keys to his mother's house and started heading in that direction before he must have passed out from all the drugs he took and ended up in that ditch. Then in the car, they also found another copy of the typed suicide note he had written. There was blood on this copy, and it was dated the same day, January 23rd. He gave varying reasons for why he was planning on visiting his mother, with the police fearing that maybe he was going there to harm her too, but Goldie does not believe that he ever intended to kill her. In the days and weeks after the murders, Neil continued to explain the crime and his thought process. He said that before he slipped into this deep depression, he was happy. He loved his life. He loved his family. Sure, but when he sought help, all the drugs did was cause a storm in his brain. He blamed the drugs for causing a disconnect between his thoughts and reality. He said that on the morning of the murders, he was talking in a very slow, deep voice. He said it was almost satanic. He said, "I remember that distinctly. It was not my voice. It was not my mannerisms. I'm not saying I was possessed. I don't believe in that. What I am saying is that the medication did something to me. Zoloft. I felt like my brain was literally on fire, like it felt so hot." Of course, after learning his entire history and hearing the details from the interviews, he was given a psychiatric evaluation at the jail where he was being held. The psychiatrist, Dr. Montes de Oca, said that a very common side effect of taking SSRIs is feeling flat, emotionless, and blunted. The doctor who evaluated Neil said that he appeared emotionally blunted and flat. He showed no emotion at first, but as he was weaned off his medication about 5 weeks after the murders, his doctor said he became hysterical. He was emotional, devastated, and felt a lot of remorse for what he did. He repeatedly asked, "How could I have done this?" Dr. Monte de Oca also talked about how his initial symptoms weren't even pure anxiety or depression. He said that the real diagnosis was hypothyroidism. He said, "Sometimes hypothyroidism can cause you to not think rationally, and you act in a totally inappropriate way because you cannot cognitively function properly. It's like a psychotic state." In light of the brutality of this crime, the state prosecutor charged him with capital murder and was seeking the death penalty. But many people came out in support of Neil. Many said that Neil was not a violent man. He had no prior criminal history of any kind. He had never been violent towards anyone. Those who knew him said that he could be an anxious person. He was very concerned about his economic status, having money, and having the perfect life. But he was not violent. However, the prosecution disagreed. The main thing they pointed out was that he had 2 copies of the suicide note, one dated 3 days before the murders, and one dated the same day as the murders. This, according to the prosecution, shows premeditation. Others also agreed with the prosecution, such as Frankie's sisters. They said that Neil was a coward, a fool, a fake. They called him a cruel man who let the devil take over and kill the family that loved him as a way to escape money troubles and his deepening debts. But Neil later explained that this was not premeditation. What happened was that when he originally planned it, he changed his mind. Until the day of the murders, he said he woke up with urgency. He said it wasn't a plan. It was more of a mental urgency that something had to occur. I would wake up in the morning and I would go and have these thoughts. We gotta go, we've gotta leave, we gotta go. It was early morning agitation, and as the days wore on, the thoughts would disappear until the day of the 23rd, when the thoughts would not disappear. He continued, "I woke up early that morning, and I remember him in the closet, and I'm kind of sitting on the floor and hearing voices. You gotta go. Now is the time. You gotta go." And these voices just became louder and louder and more intense. Because remember, he was convinced that the FBI was going to take him away and arrest him on the day of the twins' birthday party. So that might be why it seemed to be more intense urgency on this day. In light of being charged with murder and the prosecution seeking death, he decided to hire an expert psychologist to see if he could be considered mentally insane. And after 7 visits, he was diagnosed with bipolar type 2 with psychotic features, delusional disorder, personality disorder, and anxiety disorder with obsessive-compulsive features. They determined that he was in fact legally insane at the time of the murders. But the prosecution said that in those suicide notes, he wrote that he knew what he was going to do, kill his wife and kids with a gun. He knew that his actions were beyond forgiveness. He wrote that letter before the murders took place. Therefore, there was planning. This was enough for Neil to decide that a jury probably wasn't going to go with the insanity defense. So rather than going to trial, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. For this, he was given 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. After this, he is now serving the rest of his life in prison. He works as a certified law clerk in the prison library, helping other inmates navigate the legal system. He is involved in the Veterans Program because his father had served in the military. He said that he cries and cries and cries in his cell, and he regrets what he did every day. He said that he didn't even care if he got the death penalty, because if he died, then he wouldn't have to live with the guilt he faces every day. Although he did choose not to go to trial because of the death penalty, so that doesn't really make sense. But either way, he said that jail is where he deserves to be, but that the pharmaceutical companies also bear some blame. He accepts responsibility, but he still blames his actions on the medication. Now the only medications he takes are ones to control his thyroid. Traditionally, thank you for watching and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel. Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Channel Crime Story Diaries. A young woman with big dreams vanishes without a trace. Her family's desperate search for answers spans a decade, met with a wall of police indifference and neglect. Sinister secrets simmer beneath the surface as the mystery deepens. This is the haunting story of Kara Nichols, a 19-year-old aspiring model whose life was cut tragically short. Her case would remain cold for years, until a shocking confession from an unexpected source would finally lead investigators to the grim truth. But the quest for justice had only just begun. This is a cautionary tale of shattered dreams, missed opportunities, and the unrelenting love of a family determined to uncover the fate of their beloved daughter at any cost. Brace yourself for a chilling journey into the heart of darkness as we unravel the complex web of events that would ultimately bring Kara's killer to light and expose a grave miscarriage of justice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Kara Nancy Nichols was born on May 20th, 1993, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, USA. Her father, Paul Nichols, was a businessman. The profession of her mother, Julia Nichols, was not publicly disclosed. Although there is no official confirmation that Kara was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, some media reports suggest this. Kara had an older brother, Terrence, affectionately called Terry, and a younger sister whose identity remains confidential. As the middle child, Kara was considered the heart of the family, not only because of her position, but also due to her exceptional personality. She was a cheerful, creative, sociable girl whose charming and sweet disposition captivated everyone who knew her. Teachers like Dina Good, who taught her English in school, considered it an honor to have Kara in their class, recognizing her great potential from a young age. Kara showed remarkable abilities in art, especially drawing and painting. She took private lessons to improve her skills and was so talented that she won several art competitions organized by her school and local community. She especially enjoyed creating sketches of models in exquisite dresses and evening gowns. From childhood, Kara showed a keen interest in the world of fashion, particularly in modeling and makeup. After receiving her high school diploma, she began working towards realizing her dreams, despite difficulties related to substance dependence. However, Kara was ambitious and set goals for herself. By the age of 19, she got a job as a waitress, combining this work with a modeling career, mainly in the lingerie segment. Additionally, Kara considered enrolling in a cosmetology school. Having no connections in the modeling business, Kara decided to present her portfolio on the Model Mayhem website, a social network that connects photographers and models. In her profile bio, she described herself as a responsible young woman passionate about her profession. Despite being new to the modeling industry, Kara claimed that she took her work seriously and was passionate about it. Julia, Kara's mother, explained that modeling was a kind of escape for her daughter, a way to take on a different identity and distance herself from reality. Despite a happy childhood, upon entering her teenage years, Kara faced challenges. At the age of 13, she was caught attempting to shoplift and was sentenced to community service. Later, at around 16 years old, during her sophomore year of high school, an event occurred that greatly affected Kara's mental state. Her dog died. The girl fell into a deep depression and was forced to seek psychological help. Despite her parents' attempts to help their daughter and provide the necessary support, Kara was reluctant to cooperate and refused to adhere to the recommended medication regimen. The exact reasons for her emotional and psychological decline remain unclear. It could have happened due to a lack of professional help or as a result of some undisclosed psychological trauma. In any case, during this period of her life, Kara began experimenting with drugs, which eventually led to problematic use, causing even greater difficulties later on. Kara began her studies at Rampart High School in Colorado Springs, where she lived with her older brother Terry. However, due to problems caused by drug addiction, the girl had to transfer to a local school with an alternative approach to education. There, Kara was able to study and graduate without undue pressure or haste. Behavioral problems and mental disorders led Kara to change several schools with non-traditional educational methods before she was able to get her diploma. Her parents did everything possible to help their daughter cope with addiction and set her on the right path, including sending Kara to a drug addiction treatment program. However, the girl never completed rehabilitation and continued using drugs. At some point, her parents resorted to drastic measures. They actually kicked Kara out of the house because she refused to obey the rules and undergo treatment. Her mother and father hoped this would force their daughter to come to her senses and agree to rehabilitation, but that did not happen. Instead, Kara decided to return to Colorado Springs, despite her parents' objections. In the summer of 2012, Kara's parents moved to Chicago, Illinois. Initially, Kara went with them, but during this period she continued to use drugs. Therefore, her parents enrolled her in a drug addiction treatment program in Chicago. But Kara was quickly expelled from there for refusing to follow the rules. After that, the girl returned to live with her parents, but eventually decided to move back to Colorado Springs. This decision absolutely did not suit Kara's parents. They were categorically against it. But since Kara was already an adult at that time, they could not do anything to prevent her. The only consolation was that Kara's brother Terrence still lived in Colorado Springs, so she would have a family member nearby. Kara and Terrence were very close and kept in touch almost daily, so her parents knew she would be all right. Upon returning to Colorado Springs, Kara settled in a house with 3 other young men. Of course, at first, this seemed like not the best idea. Kara's mother was also against this decision, but later, after getting to know these guys better, Julia calmed down. They seemed quite decent and harmless. Having settled in Colorado Springs, Kara tried to get her life in order. She wanted to return to her job as a waitress and began building her modeling portfolio, looking for more opportunities in this field. Kara uploaded her photos to the Model Mayhem site, hoping to find photographers and other professionals who would help her start her modeling career. However, despite all her efforts, Kara faced serious financial difficulties and was forced to rely on her housemates, even borrowing food from them. The girl was constantly looking for part-time jobs to make ends meet, but she was catastrophically short of money. On October 9th, 2012, Kara told one of her housemates that she had a photo shoot scheduled in Denver, the capital of Colorado. Since Kara did not have a driver's license, she relied on other people when she needed to go somewhere. On the evening of that day, the girl told her housemate that a friend was supposed to pick her up and take her to the photo shoot. Kara left, and a few minutes later, that same housemate saw a dark-colored sedan driving away from their house through the window. He assumed it was the same friend who came to pick up Kara. That same evening, around 11:45, Kara called her brother Terrence to tell him about the shoot in Denver. But after that, she never got in touch again. The next day, October 10th, Terrence expected his sister to call him and tell him how everything went, but the call never came. Later that day, he tried to call Kara himself, but all calls were forwarded to voicemail. This meant that she had either turned off her phone or it had died. For Terrence, such behavior from his sister was very strange, because usually they communicated almost every day. When the next day, October 11th, Kara still did not get in touch, Terrence became very worried. He decided to visit his sister's housemates. They told him that they had not seen Kara since the evening of October 9th, since she left for that photo shoot. The guys said that the girl did not spend the night at home, and none of them had heard any news from her. Terrence went into Kara's room and immediately noticed that she had left her phone charger, laptop, professional makeup kit, purse, Idaho, and $300 in cash. This really scared him because he knew if his sister were planning to go somewhere for more than a day, she would never leave these things behind. In addition, Terrence noticed that since they last spoke, Kara had not appeared on any social network, which was completely unlike her. Terrence immediately contacted the El Paso County Sheriff's Office and reported his sister missing. But the police immediately replied that Kara was an adult and had the right to disappear if she wanted to. If the girl decided to cut off all contact with her family and be alone for a while, she could do so. However, Kara's relatives knew that this was not her style. They understood that if their sister was not communicating with anyone and not appearing on social networks, then she was definitely in trouble. Julia and Paul, Kara's parents, came to Colorado Springs to search for their daughter. When they got to her house, they also saw all the things that Kara had left in the room. They were sure that the girl could not have left them intentionally. So the parents again turned to the police and insisted that Kara's disappearance be taken seriously. Only after that did the police finally begin an investigation. After asking the public for help and conducting their own investigation on the internet, law enforcement officers discovered that Kara had long been posting ads for escort services for the past 2 years. When the police found out about this, Kara's parents also heard for the first time that their daughter had been engaged in prostitution since the age of 17 in order to have money for drugs. It also turned out that some of the photo shoots in which Kara supposedly participated were actually a cover for meetings with clients. Understandably, Kara's family was shocked to learn about her secret life. They were not sure whether it was worth disclosing this information, as it could negatively affect the course of the investigation. The family's fears were not unfounded. As soon as the public learned that Kara had been providing escort services, interest in her case significantly decreased. News agencies no longer sought to interview the girl's parents, and people seemed to lose their desire to look for her. Despite this, in November 2012, the police announced that they needed to talk to 2 women who were last seen with Kara. Both were described as brunettes, and one of them was believed to have been seen with Kara on the day of her disappearance. Law enforcement officials noted that these women were not suspects, but only persons who might have valuable information. One of them was probably also engaged in escorting with Kara, and the other was a friend of the missing girl. The police released a photo of this second woman, hoping to get new leads, and it worked. More calls came in from citizens with additional information. Police claimed they checked every lead and every call they received. However, this did not yield any significant results. In the following months, reports continued to come in about Kara's probable whereabouts, but in the end, they all turned out to be false. One witness claimed to have seen Kara's photo on an escort site from Las Vegas, but it turned out not to be her. Another witness allegedly saw Kara with some man, and the girl seemed frightened, but upon closer inspection, it turned out to be just some guy with his girlfriend. Due to such unsuccessful leads, the investigation reached a dead end and did not progress for a long time. In May, Detective Cliff Porter, who had been working on the case from the very beginning, admitted in a publicly released recording that he had not investigated Kara's disappearance very diligently. He overlooked many important details and clues that could have helped solve her case. Of course, this confession greatly saddened the girl's parents. They were extremely disappointed that so much potentially useful information was ignored and so many leads were not followed up on. The family was outraged by the indifference and negligence of the sheriff's office in investigating Kara's disappearance. After Cliff Porter's public confession, Kara's case was transferred to a new investigator, who finally gave the investigation the necessary momentum. Thanks to his efforts, in February 2013, an ad was found that Kara had posted on October 9, 2012, a few hours before her disappearance. The ad was titled, "Sexy New Blonde in Town 21 Inches," and was signed with a fake name. It contained a photo of Kara in lingerie and her phone number. Using this information, the police analyzed calls from Kara's phone to find out who she had been communicating with on the night of her disappearance. It turned out that from 9:58 to 11:08 on October 9th, she called the same number 8 times. After talking to her brother at 11:45, her phone was last used at 11:59, and since then it had been turned off. Unfortunately, at that time, it was not possible to establish to whom this suspicious number belonged. The case only moved forward on May 8, 2013, when a 38-year-old man named Joel Hollendorfer called the detective leading the investigation. He admitted that it was his phone number from which Kara had been contacted that night. According to Joel, on October 9, 2012, he was looking for escort services and responded to Kara's ad. The man confirmed that they had called each other and even agreed to meet. However, according to him, Kara preferred to go to clients, while Joel preferred to meet on his own territory. Allegedly, this was the reason their date ultimately did not take place. The police began tracking Kara's movements using geolocation data from her mobile phone. This allowed detectives to recreate a fairly detailed picture of her route that night. They found out that Kara left her home in Colorado Springs around 11:16 and headed east, gradually moving away from the city. Eventually, her phone signal was last recorded on Burgess Road, after which it stopped showing signs of life. Comparing the information obtained with the data on Hollendorfer's place of residence, the police found out that Joel's parents lived on that very Burgess Road. This was the same area where Kara's cell phone was last spotted. Based on these telling facts, law enforcement officers obtained a search warrant for the property of the suspect's parents. The search warrant was executed on October 15, 2014. Various services participated in the search operation. In particular, dogs trained to search for corpses and ground-penetrating radars were used. Betty, Joel's mother, personally accompanied law enforcement officers around the estate and pointed out the places where, over the past 30 years since the family bought the house in 1985, they had buried dead horses and other animals. Although the police noticed several areas where the soil had been disturbed and the dogs signaled the presence of corpses, these sites were not excavated because, according to Betty, they were supposed to contain only animal remains. Instead, when the search of the Hollendorfer estate yielded no results, Betty herself suggested checking another territory to which Joel had access and which was located across the road at the address Green Acres Lane. Police contacted the owners of that property and obtained their permission to inspect it. The second search took place on October 22nd. 4 dogs trained to search for human remains were brought to the site. They were placed at the 4 corners of the 20-acre plot and then released. All 4 dogs immediately headed to one specific spot, which looked like a fresh grave. It was immediately dug up, and the police saw traces of recent soil disturbance and a burial pit approximately the size of a human body. However, nothing was found in the pit itself. After these searches, the detectives visited Joel Hollendorfer again. During the interrogation, the man admitted that he had indeed been looking for information about Kara and intended to meet with her that night. However, he continued to insist that they never actually met. Joel said that he had arranged to meet Kara at a roadside Waffle House cafe, but the girl allegedly did not show up. Hollendorfer also told the police that he had used escort services many times and, moreover, suffered from drug addiction. He was once married, but the marriage broke up precisely because of his problems with drugs and the services of prostitutes. Investigators managed to establish the identity of Joel's ex-wife. She turned out to be Christina Palmer. They tried to contact the woman to talk, but at that time they could not find her. The investigation reached a dead end again, and investigators were considering various versions of what might have happened. According to one theory, Kara worked for a pimp, but at some point decided to go solo. Perhaps angered by this, the pimp could have killed the girl. Another version was that Kara owed the pimp a large sum that she could not repay because she was in a difficult financial situation. In that case, the pimp could also kill the girl over debts. Another theory suggested that Kara could have been kidnapped and fallen into the hands of human traffickers. Some speculated that the girl was still alive, as reports occasionally came in from people who allegedly saw her in public places or on escort service sites. Such sightings suggested that Kara had not died, but had been taken captive and was being controlled by criminals who were forcing her into prostitution. However, none of these options had sufficient evidence. It took almost 10 years before a decisive breakthrough finally occurred in the case. In 2022, police managed to track down Joel's ex-wife, Christina. At that time, she was living in the state of Virginia. Investigators asked the Federal Bureau of Investigation to contact the woman and conduct an interview with her. On February 1st, 2022, FBI Special Agents Brandon Pree and Michael Willis met with Christina, who finally agreed to testify. During the conversation with the FBI agents, Christina said that Joel's father had died in November 2014. After his father's death, Joel invited Christina to go for a ride with him in his new pickup truck. She agreed, and during this trip, her ex-husband confessed to her about a terrible deed. According to Christina, Joel told her that he had once hired an escort, and during sex in the car, he accidentally strangled her to death. He then took the girl's body to his parents' yard, wrapped it in garbage bags, sprinkled it with lime, and buried it in an old horse grave. Joel allegedly told Christina that he felt very guilty about what he had done. He also confessed that he had told his father about this incident and considered himself responsible for his father's death, who had allegedly been very worried that his son had committed murder. Christina told the FBI agents that she truly believed that both of Joel's parents knew exactly what had happened to the escort and were trying to cover up their son's crime. According to her, this allowed law enforcement to quickly arrest Joel Hollendorfer on suspicion of murdering the missing Kara Nichols. On February 7, 2022, around 6:52 in the morning, Joel Hollendorfer was arrested on suspicion of murdering Kara Nichols. During the arrest, an outstanding warrant was found for him in another case. Joel voluntarily agreed to talk to 2 detectives about Kara's case. During the interrogation, Hollendorfer again confirmed that he was acquainted with Kara and had spoken to her on the phone, but denied ever meeting the girl in person or being involved in her disappearance or death. Then the detectives used a trick. They showed Joel aerial photographs of his parents' estate and asked him to indicate exactly where the animal graves were located. Using Google Maps, the police showed the suspect various locations on the Hollendorfer property. Joel pointed to several areas, but when asked about the place marked on the map, the man replied that it was just a hill and nothing was buried there. Meanwhile, detectives had a similar conversation with the suspect's mother, Betty. When asked about the same area, the woman admitted that her favorite horse, named Milo, was buried there under the hill. Armed with this information, on the same day, February 7, 2022, police returned to the Hollendorfer estate on Burgess Road and searched the area that was marked on the map. At a depth of about 90 centimeters, they found a black plastic garbage bag. Inside the bag were human remains, most likely belonging to 19-year-old Kara Nichols, who had disappeared over 9 years earlier. According to a summary of the case materials, which was later formalized into an official indictment, the investigation came to the following version of events. On the evening of October 9, 2012, Joel Hollendorfer arranged to pick up Kara Nichols from her home, since she did not have her own transport or a driver's license, and provided services exclusively on the client's territory. Somewhere on the way to the destination, Joel strangled Kara. He then took her body to his parents' estate, as evidenced by the last ping of the girl's phone there, which Joel probably turned off immediately upon arrival. After that, Hollendorfer buried Kara on the property, wrapping her remains in garbage bags and sprinkling them with lime. Further events unfolded as the suspect's ex-wife described. As for the grave on the Green Acres plot, to which Betty Hollendorfer led the police during the first search, investigators speculated that it could have been the first place where Joel buried Kara's body. Later, perhaps on the advice of his mother, he secretly exhumed the remains and moved them to a more secure location, the old horse grave. However, these speculations, despite their logic, remained unproven. Shortly after the discovery of Kara's remains, 46-year-old Joel Hollendorfer was officially charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. During the preliminary court hearing, the bail amount for the suspect was increased from $500,000 to $1 million. In addition, the court ordered the confiscation of Hollendorfer's passport, as he was considered to be at high risk of fleeing. At the next hearing, the charge against Joel was reclassified to first-degree murder. The basis for this was the results of Kara's autopsy, which, however, were not made public. The court also completely canceled the possibility of posting bail. This meant that Hollendorfer would await sentencing behind bars, with no chance of being released on bail. After the discovery of their daughter's remains, the Kara Nichols family published the following statement. "It is with deep sorrow and a heavy heart that we report that yesterday, law enforcement officials informed us that the remains of our beautiful daughter have been found, and the suspect in this case has been arrested. With this letter, we want to express our sincere gratitude to everyone who, over the past 10 years, has given their time, money, attention, and assistance to the search for Kara. Thanks to the tireless support of the National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation, we did not lose hope of finding our girl all these years. Representatives of the coalition will continue to stay with our family to seek justice for Kara in court." Michelle Bart, a spokeswoman for the Nichols family from the National Women's Coalition Against Violence and Exploitation, also made a statement. "Writing these words breaks my heart. After almost 10 years, we had hoped for a different outcome. Kara was a daughter, sister, niece, and friend to many people. Her life mattered in 2012 and still matters in 2022. Our fight is not over. Now is the time to ensure that the person or persons responsible for Kara's death are brought to justice. We will do everything in our power to prevent the defense from tarnishing the girl's character and reputation. We will remind the world that no matter what Kara's lifestyle was, she was an innocent victim who in no way deserved such a terrible death. Let us remember, no matter what happened, Kara did nothing wrong and is not to blame for her own tragic fate." Michelle Bard also noted that in her opinion, Joel was not the only one who should be held responsible for Kara's death. The activist claims that, according to the prosecutors, the suspicious behavior of the suspect's mother, Betty Hollendorfer, indicates that the woman knew much more than she was saying. Miss Bart expressed outrage that the investigators who were handling this case had phone call records and information about the Hollendorfer estate 10 years ago, but did nothing to bring the suspect to justice. Summing up this tragic story, I want to emphasize once again, no matter what Kara Nichols' occupation was, and no matter what risks she consciously or unconsciously took, she was not to blame for her own death. Kara became a victim of a brutal killer and deserved to have her life continue. I hope that her family can find solace in the fact that justice has finally prevailed, and Kara's killer will spend many years or even the rest of his life behind bars. I sincerely sympathize with Kara's loved ones, who had been searching for her with love for all these 10 years. They demonstrated incredible strength of spirit and perseverance, especially given the fact that the police had ignored important evidence for so long. Let them know from now on that they did everything in their power for Kara. Finally, I want to warn young girls and women who may find themselves in a similar life situation. Please be as careful as possible, trust your intuition, and do not risk yourself, even if you are desperately in need of money. Inform your friends about your plans and movements. take care of yourself, and let the tragic story of Kara Nichols be a warning to all of us. May she rest in eternal peace. Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. Adriana Hutto, a 7-year-old girl from the small town of Esto, Florida, lived with her mother Amanda Lewis and her 6-year-old half-brother AJ. From an early age, Adriana suffered from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, which made it difficult for her to sit still and stay out of trouble. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition that is usually diagnosed in childhood and often persists into adulthood. People with ADHD have trouble paying attention, controlling impulsive behaviors, and regulating excessive activity. According to Amanda, she struggled to connect with her daughter because of the girl's behavior. In an interview, the woman admitted that she lacked patience with Adriana and lashed out at the girl more often than at her younger son. AJ was the complete opposite of his sister, calm and quiet. He could play by himself for hours. When Adriana was just 6 months old, Amanda was called to serve in the National Guard and had to leave her child with relatives for several months. Amanda believed that this separation hindered the formation of a strong bond between her and her daughter, although their relationship improved over time. In addition to the strained relationship between Adriana and her mother, the Lewis family had other problems. The Department of Children and Families, DCF, began weekly visits to their home after school staff complained about the children's hygiene. A social worker discussed Amanda's parenting methods, particularly her disciplinary practices. An inspection of the home confirmed the social services concerns. The house was dirty and smelly, and there were no toys in the children's room. Amanda explained that she had hidden all the toys in the shed as punishment, but investigators later found no toys there. 3 months before the tragedy, Amanda's co-workers at the nursing home where she worked heard troubling confessions from her. After Adriana ruined the interior of her mother's car with a marker, Amanda let slip that she wanted to kill the girl. No one took those words seriously at the time, dismissing them as the emotions of an irritated woman. But in light of subsequent events, they took on an ominous meaning. August 8, 2007, was an ordinary hot weekday in Florida. The sun was scorching. 27-year-old Amanda Lewis, who worked as a nursing assistant, was returning home around 8 in the morning after a night shift. Exhausted, she lay down on the couch while her children, 7-year-old Adriana and 6-year-old AJ, were glued to the TV, watching cartoons. Amanda's 14-year-old stepson, Alan Michael, was still asleep. Waking up between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, Amanda found her younger children excited. They begged for permission to play outside before going shopping for school supplies. In the backyard of the house stood an inflatable pool about 120 centimeters, 4 feet high. Amanda strictly ordered the children not to approach it without her supervision. She usually kept the pool ladder locked in the shed. While the mother was taking a shower and hanging up the washed clothes, getting ready to go to the store, Adriana and AJ went outside. Looking out the window, Amanda saw her son climbing trees like a little Tarzan. The girl was nowhere to be seen, but the woman did not attach much importance to this. Children often disappear into their fantasy worlds. But sometime later, glancing at the yard again, Amanda saw AJ reaching for something in the pool while standing on a small red wagon. Alarmed, the woman called out to her son, and then he shouted the words that made her blood run cold. Adriana was lying face down in the pool and not moving. Amanda rushed to the pool. Reaching it, she saw a terrible sight. Her 7-year-old daughter was floating face down, her body blue, with water flowing from her nose and mouth. Amanda called 911 and began begging for help.
911.
I need an ambulance.
What's wrong, ma'am?
My daughter fell in the pool and she's not breathing.
Where at, ma'am?
In Esto,
Ma'am, what's your address?
3343 First Avenue South.
3343 First Avenue South.
Yes, down the road from the post office at the very end.
But when the dispatcher connected her with medics for CPR instructions, the woman seemed not to hear their advice. She screamed into the phone for them to hurry up before her child died. Charles Corcoran, the fire chief, was the first to arrive at the scene. In the backyard of the house, he saw Amanda Lewis kneeling by the body of her 7-year-old daughter, trying to give her artificial respiration. The man took over. Adriana's body was still warm, but her pulse would disappear and then reappear. The girl was airlifted to Bay Medical Center, where a team of doctors fought for her life for over an hour. But at 5:05 p.m., Adriana was pronounced dead. The scene of the tragedy indicated an accident waiting to happen. A child's wagon was pressed against the pool, and a child's bicycle lay right next to it. Investigators carefully documented these details, trying to reconstruct the sequence of events. In Corcoran's opinion, Adriana could have used the wagon as a ladder, climbed onto the edge of the pool, and then fallen into the water, hitting her head. This version was consistent with the bruises and abrasions on the girl's forehead. The wagon and bicycle explained their origin. Amanda's reaction to her daughter's death raised many questions. While Adriana was being taken to the hospital, the medics saw Amanda in a state of shock, which was quite consistent with the stressful situation. But in the hospital itself, the woman behaved differently. When Dr. Fox came to her to report on the girl's condition, Amanda asked indifferently where the vending machines were. This conversation troubled the doctor, and when an hour later he returned to tell the mother the terrible news of Adriana's death, she showed no emotion. Witnesses in the admissions department also noticed Amanda's odd composure. The woman calmly entered the room where her dead child lay, stroked her hair, kissed her on the forehead, and walked out. Less than 3 hours after her daughter's death, detectives found Amanda at the hospital. They wanted to talk to her about the circumstances of the incident. Amanda told the police her version of events, how she came home from work and went to take a nap, how she woke up and took a shower, how she let the children go play, and then heard the terrible news from AJ. When asked about the children's meals that day, the woman replied that Adriana had complained of nausea and vomited in the morning, so she refused to eat. Allegedly, she and her brother did not have breakfast or lunch because they were going to stop for a snack somewhere on the way to the store. When asked about the signs of beatings on the girl's body, Amanda gave ambiguous answers. She suggested that Adriana could have quarreled with her brother, and he could have hit her. She also hinted that the bruises remained after playing with the neighboring children. The investigation later dismissed these versions. An examination proved that the blows that caused the bruises were inflicted by an adult shortly before death. During her conversation with the police, Amanda admitted that her daughter had recently been examined by a doctor who confirmed the diagnosis of ADHD. The attention deficit forced Adriana to constantly switch from one activity to another. And on that fatal day, she wanted to swim, then go shopping, then remembered the pool again. According to Amanda, the girl even resisted taking her prescribed ADHD medication. The detectives wondered if the mother had tried to resuscitate her daughter before the medics arrived. Amanda assured them that she had tried to give Adriana artificial respiration, but was not sure she was doing it correctly. Therefore, the main thing she wanted at that moment was for help to arrive quickly. The overall picture that emerged during the conversation indicated a difficult relationship between Amanda and Adriana. Repeatedly, the woman reiterated how hard it was for her to communicate with her daughter because of her developmental issues. She also admitted that she sometimes lashed out at the child, yelled at her, and slapped her. But, according to the mother, those were just emotions, not a real desire to cause harm. While Amanda was in the hospital, investigators heard an alarming statement. AJ's grandparents, who were taking care of the boy at the time, reported that he was telling a shocking story about his sister's death. AJ claimed that their mother had drowned Adriana, allegedly as punishment for bad behavior. Law enforcement immediately contacted child psychologists. That same day, AJ was interrogated twice in their presence.
Who threw her in the pool?
My mama,
Mama threw who in the pool?
my sister, Adriana. So AJ screamed, AJ, AJ, call the police.
The 6-year-old boy repeated his words. Adriana had infuriated her mother by spraying window cleaner all over the living room and even on the TV. For this, Amanda grabbed the girl and repeatedly submerged her head underwater.
My sister, she wet me and sprayed something that make everything smell good, and she didn't do this. She done the stuff that she didn't supposed to, so my mama got mad at her. So she threw her in the pool.
AJ described in detail and even demonstrated how it happened. Despite the persistence with which the boy stuck to his version, some contradictions emerged in his story. At first, he claimed that he saw with his own eyes how his mother was drowning his sister. But then he let slip that at that moment he was shooting a toy gun in another place. AJ also mentioned how Amanda allegedly took Adriana to the park and pushed her underwater there. But he could not explain how they got to that park. Learning of the accusations from her son's mouth, Amanda called them nonsense. She stated that the boy had a very vivid imagination and could have simply made up this story after reading comics or watching cartoons. When asked why AJ would so harshly slander his own mother, the woman just shrugged. The police faced a dilemma. On the one hand, the testimony of a 6-year-old child could not be 100% reliable. At this age, the line between fantasy and reality is still very thin. And the boy had just experienced a severe psychological trauma, losing his sister. This could have affected his memory and caused him to distort reality. However, completely rejecting AJ's words was not an option either. Too many details indicated that it was not just childish fantasies. Investigators decided to dig deeper into the history of the Lewis family and soon stumbled upon something frightening. It turned out that Amanda had already lost a child under suspicious circumstances. When she was 17, her 6-month-old daughter Alexis died in her sleep. The death was attributed to an epileptic seizure, but now doubts arose about this. Could it be that Adriana had become the second child to die under the supervision of a neglectful mother? The police felt they could not ignore this fact. A month after the tragedy, Amanda Lewis was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and child abuse. The prosecution offered her a plea deal for involuntary manslaughter, which carried a 10-year prison sentence. This would have avoided a full trial, during which AJ would have had to testify against his mother. But Amanda rejected this offer, insisting on her innocence. The case went to trial in February 2008. The defense tried to prevent AJ from testifying, citing his unreliability as a witness due to his age and trauma. But the court ruled that the boy could testify, and his appearance on the stand became one of the most dramatic moments of the trial. When AJ entered the courtroom, at first he did not even recognize his own mother, who was sitting right in front of him. The child calmly answered questions, assuring that his mother was not in the room. Suddenly, Amanda started crying, and this confused the boy. However, the prosecutor insisted that AJ take a closer look at the woman between her two lawyers. Eventually, the child recognized his mother and burst into tears. Those present were not left indifferent by this sight. Having recovered, AJ was able to more or less coherently retell the events of that fatal day. He confirmed that he saw his mother pushing Adriana's head underwater while holding her hand over the girl's face so she would not scream. The boy again showed how Amanda was choking and begging for help. This testimony made a depressing impression on the jury. Next, AJ was shown his own drawings made during conversations with investigators. In them, a child's hand depicted shapeless figures near a blue spot that was meant to symbolize the pool. The boy confirmed that it was Amanda drowning Adriana, while he himself was watching it in fright from a tree branch. These illustrations lent AJ's testimony a chilling credibility. The defense, in turn, cast doubt on the reliability of the 7-year-old witness's testimony. The lawyers insisted that a child of that age is too vulnerable and prone to fantasizing. In the defense's opinion, AJ could well have made up the story of the murder under the influence of grief over the loss of his sister and the leading questions of adults. Moreover, the defense hinted that the boy had been brainwashed by his grandparents, who disliked Amanda. Another argument of the lawyers was that Adriana's death could be explained by accidental drowning. The bruises on the girl's body allegedly appeared earlier as a result of active play and skirmishes with her brother. and the fact that Adriana did not eat on the day of her death, the defense explained by the side effects of ADHD medications, which could suppress appetite. All this, in the defense's opinion, pointed to a tragic but unintentional incident. The prosecution, on the other hand, cast doubt on the version of accidental drowning. After all, the pool was only 80 to 90 centimeters, 31 to 35 inches deep, while Adriana's height was almost 120 centimeters, 47 inches. So if the girl had simply fallen into the water, she would have immediately stood up. The fact that she drowned indicated that the child was intentionally and prolongedly held in the pool. The prosecution also focused the jury's attention on Amanda's negligent attitude toward her children. Prosecutors reminded them of the constant visits by social services, the lack of toys in the home, and the absence of basic amenities like sheets. And also, about the lack of emotion in a mother who had just lost her daughter. All this, according to the prosecutors, testified to Amanda's callousness and potential capacity for murder. Important evidence also came from the testimony of Amanda's co-workers, who heard her mention wanting to get rid of Adriana. Particularly telling was the episode with the car interior defaced with a marker and the direct threat against her daughter. Prosecutors argued that these incidents showed the true face of the defendant, a cruel and unrestrained woman. After 4 days of hearings, it took the jury only 2 hours to reach a unanimous conclusion. They found Amanda Lewis guilty of first-degree murder and child abuse. The judge announced the sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Hearing the court's decision, Amanda showed no emotion, as throughout the entire trial, she maintained a calm and somewhat detached appearance. Her lawyers called the jury's verdict a grave mistake and said they would fight for their client's release. The case of Amanda Lewis caused quite a stir in the United States. Many expressed sympathy for the single mother who, in their opinion, fell victim to a coincidence of circumstances and an imperfect justice system. Others saw the tragedy as confirmation that children are always in danger if they are raised by mentally unstable and antisocial parents. Particular discussions revolved around the figure of AJ. Many were outraged that a woman's fate was decided on the basis of the words of a 7-year-old boy. There were statements that a child of that age is very easy to steer in the right direction with leading questions. And excessive pressure from adults, parents, investigators, prosecutors, could have distorted AJ's memories and imposed a skewed picture of events on him. Supporters of the verdict, on the other hand, reminded that the child's testimony was far from the only evidence of Amanda Lewis' guilt. AJ's statements merely fit into the overall context: the mother's indifference to her children, her unbalanced psyche, and the ominous hints about Adriana. And also, the bruises on the body of the deceased, which matched the picture of violence described by the boy. In 2010, Amanda filed an appeal against the verdict but lost. Since then, she has continued to serve her sentence at Lowell Correctional Institution. In her few interviews, the woman invariably declares her innocence and hopes for justice. Meanwhile, AJ grew up under the care of relatives who adopted him shortly after Amanda's arrest. According to media reports, the now 23-year-old man works and tries to live a normal life. However, according to those close to him, the events of 16 years ago still haunt him in nightmares. It is unknown if he communicates with his mother and if he would ever want to renew his relationship with her. Thus, the story of Adriana Hutto will probably never receive an unambiguous conclusion. There are too many painful moments and gray areas in it that provoke fierce arguments. Can a person be sentenced to life imprisonment based on the words of a child? Is Amanda Lewis really a sick and cruel mother capable of murder? Or perhaps the woman simply became a hostage to an insidious coincidence of circumstances? Everyone can seek their own answers to these questions. The only thing that is beyond doubt is that the death of 7-year-old Adriana became an irreparable tragedy. The girl, who needed increased attention, love, and care due to her developmental issues, did not receive it. Through outbursts of anger, whether conscious or not, her mother destroyed the lives of her 2 children. And even if it happened by accident, escaping responsibility is no longer an option. The case of Amanda Lewis can serve as a reminder for all parents. Parenting is a complex process that requires patience, wisdom, and dedication. Every child is special with their own needs and personality. The task of adults is to accept this and learn to manage without violence, because, as experience shows, an outburst of irritation can lead to irreparable consequences. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.